Okay, then we can get started. The call to order. I'm calling to order this meeting at 6:03 p.m. And if Renee would please make the roll call.
Sure. Give me just a second.
That was a different second. Okay.
Sorry,
No, that's all right.
it's loading. Okay. Mary Donner,
Here.
Melissa Adamson. Here. Garrett Anderson,
Here.
Carolyn Campbell.
Carolyn Campbell?
Here.
He's married over here.
Shaylin Daigle,
That's okay. I don't think Mary's going to be.
Charles Eldridge,
Yes.
Ellie Fleming. Here. Nancy Glisman.
Here.
Patricia Grant.
Here.
Scott Henning. Taylor Johnson.
Here.
Mary McCann. Jim McConaughey. Harry Lloyd.
Here.
Michelle Timian.
Here.
Adam Wallen.
Here.
Randall Liston.
Okay, next is the approval of the draft minutes. Have you all read them? Do you have anything to change? And I do. I have 2 scriveners. It's not a big deal. And actually, I only have 1. On page 2 of 43 of our group, there is a section that calls in the minutes that Mary McCann quested as opposed to questioned, and to make that change so that it makes sense. I'm sure questioned is a word. I've read a lot of them that I didn't know at all. And the key, and the goals and key things, so it's not, but, and again, it's scrivener, it's not a big deal. There's nothing of importance that I needed to change. With that, I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Okay, approval of the agenda. Does anybody need to move anything up? Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, then we're going to go for approval of the agenda. Does anybody have anything to add to it or want to move anything up or down? Sure. That's okay. So, yes.
I move acceptance of the agenda.
Sounds good. Anybody second it?
Second.
Perry? Perry. Okay, chair comments. Well, we're off to our first big meeting. This one's going to be very interesting. It's key recommendations memorandum. We're going to go through the whole schlemiel and see where we go from here, because after this, we're going to start having meetings every month to talk about the things that Brandon is talking about tonight that we find most important. I hope everybody has put their comments in so that Brandon has a chance to see them before tonight. If not, that he can work on them tonight and within the next couple days, so we can have a better draft of what we're working with within the next sometime. Well, I'd like to see it within a week, and you can't do that, I'm sure, unless you think you can.
Which kinds of edits are we talking about? It's
So
typos and things like that, yes.
If we start adding the questions in, and you can make the comments so that we can have a better copy of our draft recommendations, so that we make sure that we're all on the same page, because it was pretty rough, and we still need to be looking at things that we can do. I look at things that other people don't. I'd really rather listen to what you have to say and make my comments into, okay, you've got 3 minutes, or okay, let's go on to the next thing, or where we need to be with stuff. I run a meeting, I'm not trying to put anything on anybody otherwise. Is that okay? Okay, then, public comment. Any public here today? Oh, I thought we were going to have somebody here tonight, but apparently not. Okay, so the next thing is election of officers. for 1 year. There is the vice chair. Did you want to stay vice chair?
Sure.
Resounding.
I don't see anybody jumping, really. And the other one is what is commonly referred to as the treasurer. But that could be second vice chair, or it could be, we can call it anything we want to. If I can't be here and the vice chair can't be there, the next person in line is the person who is running the meeting. So, whatever that designation is there anybody willing to be third up?
I will.
Yeah, perfect, okay. Okay, so we have a vice chair for Charlie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Unanimous? And for third up, whatever we call you. Not late for dinner, but it's an honorary of yes. Pat Grant.
These things are really bad.
There you go. Really, there, and she came in a wheelchair tonight, so let's just say she's up for it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Unanimously, we now have our new committee for next month. And then you will be sitting here. Because we are it. Okay, so that takes care of that. Old business, don't have any old business. Anybody have anything from last month that you want to share that we didn't share? Or that we don't know about? Please, and again, feel free to send emails at any time, as long as they are copied to Renee and I. We will get back to you if they need to be to somebody else, or they're coming from somebody else, or you send it to somebody else. Please, again, make sure that Renee and I have those copies so that we can keep track of the conversations that are going on in case they need to get into Brandon's silo. Maybe that's not the right word, is it? You're the consultant silo.
Purview.
Purview, yes, there you go. So new business, we're going to start with the overview of the vision statement.
Good to see everyone, good to see some new faces.
15 minutes,
15 minutes for, just for the,
more like 50, it's okay, you're
I
good.
was actually gonna talk to the group about trying to go through that part a little quicker, so.
Oh, okay,
So like I said, key
quick is good.
All right, so as a reminder, I know we've got some new faces on the group. House Levine is the lead consultant for this effort. I'm Brandon Nolan, I'm a practice lead, House Levine, and really kind of running the whole show with my team as well as the group of consultants here. We have Geosyntec, which is handling green infrastructure, water resources infrastructure, KLOA, who's handling transportation, where Gillespie, who's helping out with historic preservation, and then Solutions in the Land, addressing agriculture and farm preservation. So, agenda, project overview, we're going to remind everyone kind of the outreach that's been completed to date, talk about the vision and planning themes, and then really the bulk of our time is going to be on that priority key recommendations, where we've gotten input from you all about what you wanted to focus the conversation on, so we're going to use that to really focus our conversation, and then as we have time, we'll get into any remaining components you guys want to talk about, but we're going to really try to maximize discussion tonight around the things you view as most critical. So, reminder of the planning process, about a 1.5 year long process. You know, we're 6 to 8 months in here. We've delivered the existing conditions analysis. Really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is answer these 3 key questions of what's the current condition of the county. You've all seen that report. We reviewed that at the last meeting. We were here to present with you all. Second question that we're trying to answer as part of this planning process is where do we want to go? That's really what tonight's review document represents, is kind of the outline of where we want to, the policies we want to pursue as part of the next part of this phase. And then the third question we're answering is kind of how do we get there? What's that roadmap? So after tonight's meeting and some additional back and forth on tightening things up, basically the recommendations memo we put together is the outline of what we're going to be fleshing out over the next 6 months or so. So that's our work that we're going to kind of embark on following this meeting.
Brandon, for just a second, everybody's got a sheet that says notes on it. so that we have an extra sheet to write down anything. Did you make one? Okay, well, the reason I have this is because I also have acronyms and a glossary list that I've started. I'm going to get a copy of it electronically and send it to everybody. It's everything that I saw that I didn't understand or I thought needed to be an area of reference, including other words. So when we're doing this, you can use this, you can use your notes this time, and then we'll keep that up too, so that we have everybody on the same page. Sorry, I stopped you.
Good idea.
No, that's great, and that's actually something that the plan that we're updating, well, the original plan that was written in 2010 included some key facts or key phrases and things like that at the beginning of each chapter as well, so it's kind of.
And we can add that in there and keep it going and update it occasionally. Thank you.
So, again, a reminder of kind of engagement that's been done as part of this process to date. We had about 500 survey responses, which we were really pleased with in terms of volume of survey responses. Really good geographic representation in the county. Had a few folks do map.social. We'd always love more, but that provided another avenue of input that was more place-based. Series of key person interviews and focus groups, boards and commissions workshops. These were a big lift. And I feel like 63 is kind of undercounting. I got to double check that, but I mean, we led several, and several had at least 20 or 30 people in them. Kind of focused around different topics like water resources, green infrastructure. And then we held a series of municipal workshops. Back out of your way, I'm sorry. Municipal workshops with basically planning staff throughout the county. Municipalities, townships were all invited to these powwows. The idea being that we're going to try to repeat that process a couple different times in this planning process to make sure we're coordinating county and local kind of planning efforts. Also had a series of visioning workshops around the same time we delivered the existing conditions report to you all. Held a series of total of 5, had 72 participants for those in-person kind of mapping exercises. So that's going to inform the preliminary land use framework that we've pulled together, along with all the other analyses we've performed. So again, reminder of some of the key themes. Really a big emphasis on open space conservation, adaptive reuse, trying to provide housing for a variety of age groups, affordable housing or attainable housing, making sure we have quality infrastructure, a big emphasis on transit and providing quality kind of non-traditional or active transportation routes. Really, again, a focus on the shifting retail environment and kind of the vacancies people are seeing along some of the key commercial corridors, protecting waterways, historic preservation in general. I mean, so you can see, I mean, a lot of these topics kind of gave us kind of food for thought and helped put perspective into how we wanted to approach developing these key recommendations. So we used the tone from the community conversations to guide our efforts with the key recommendations we're going to be going over today. So, vision.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
All right, roadway widening,
Again, yeah, that's what we heard from the community. Like people want to, there's complaints about congestion in some areas and people wanting to see wider roads.
who?
Some people, of the hundreds we talked to, some people had that concern. We're not saying this is a recommendation, we're saying this is what people said.
You have a lot of farmers and a lot of horsemen that said they wanted wider roads. And did you make provisions for hike, bike, horseman trails? Did you put that in there?
In what, the key
If
recommendation?
you widen roads, you really need to have then areas for the hike, bike, horseman trails along with wider roads. Because road widening just makes faster traffic and more congestion. So I'm wondering if you made provision for it.
So, I mean, we're not there yet. I mean, that's kind of what tonight's about, is to discuss some of those aspects so we can get to that level of detail for the plan. I mean, this is really just recognizing that some members of the community feel like congestion is problematic in parts of the county. So the idea of widening roads as a recommendation, I mean, we're trying to coordinate with the long-range transportation plan that's being developed actively right now.
The what?
the long-range transportation plan that's being developed concurrently with this process
Yeah.
is a key piece into that. We have KLA on board to help inform kind of how these pieces dovetail together, and we can definitely, and I know that Solutions in Land has farmers' priorities kind of top of their mind as well, so we're gonna make sure that infrastructure improvements help that group.
Because the road widening never, ever helps agriculture.
Yeah, I do understand what you're talking about, but I think when we get,
He's gonna address that then?
he will, and if he doesn't, Scott will, because there's a whole thing about how the roads are funded. If you fund everything yourself, it's cheap. If you start going to the city, it costs more money. If you use county funds, you have to do more things. When you get federal funds, you have to do more and more and more. So it depends on who's making the money, and he's the one who can tell you where it comes from and what it goes to. So in all likelihood, a lot of this will be widening roads in more congested areas. And the people in the rural areas will have their roads the way they need to have them for their growing seasons. Kind of, well,
We'll
for your
see.
agriculture.
We'll see. Okay.
We'll see, but
We'll see.
that's the short answer, and you two can get together later.
Any other questions about the process or outreach to date before we keep going? So the vision, I want to kind of outline the structure for the plan. I mean, ultimately, the vision is really kind of, if you're working backwards, the key recommendations, the details, and the vision is the higher level. This is what we're trying to achieve in the county across the board. So it's kind of a representation of that collective summary of outreach we heard, as well as all the direction we've received from you all to date, and really provides that end goal that we're working towards. So we have the vision statement available in like 3 slides, kind of a shorthand version. We can walk through this, or we can keep going. I know we have your comments on the kind of the more detailed comments already, so I'll defer to Mary how you want to proceed here. I mean, I can walk through these items, or we can
Walk through those.
Okay. So, again, big picture. Really trying to promote an area where people want to live, work, and explore together, right? Providing quality living environments, preserving nature like we talked about, providing an opportunity for employment, all within kind of the same regional context. Balanced growth is a big kind of talking point among the community members we spoke to, and it's something we really want to promote here, right? So as we're talking about development, making sure it's done in a way that's sustainable and provides those opportunities we're looking for. Abundant, affordable housing options. So housing affordability, as we addressed in the key rec memo, is kind of a couple things. It's attainability at multiple price points for different income brackets, and also looking at subsidized housing as well. So it's a mix of the two. And then looking at, again, those employment opportunities, workforce development opportunities, to really, again, make the county a great place to have it all, and not necessarily have jobs leaving every day. Big emphasis on agriculture. Obviously, it's a huge contributor to economy. We want to make sure that that stays the case. And how do we foster that positive environment for the farmers and ag industry as we're talking about change elsewhere in the county. Providing for a variety of outdoor and recreational opportunities. So recognizing the great natural assets you already have here in the county and building on that. And then tying in historic preservation as well. So looking at things, as we'll get into the land use framework, things like your historic crossroads, adaptive reuse opportunities, folding historic resources into new development. Providing reliable infrastructure. So as we're talking about growth and change, making sure you have the infrastructure and services to go with that. And that includes your transportation network and kind of coordinating transportation improvements alongside growth and development. And looking at also alternative transportation. So while yes, we need to provide room for individual vehicles and cars, we also want to make sure we're providing multimodal access as well. Again, there's a big emphasis on transit and complete streets within the county. Another part of kind of that overarching framework for this plan, again, the vision sets the tone for the document. Another key piece that came out of the RFP process that's come through in this group, that's come through in our communication with the public, has been around a few key areas. So sustainability, public health, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. These will be themes that we'll be including in the plan document as I call them kind of threads that go through each chapter. So We're gonna be making sure that these are represented in all the key recommendations, and you've seen some of that already in the document provided where we indicated some shorthand if it had an S or a P or a DEI, that flags the key recommendations tying back to these themes. So in the plan document, we'll have the vision statement, and then we'll have discussion of each of these themes, talk about why they're kind of paramount importance to the community. And that the fact that you're gonna have recommendations in every section of this plan that reinforce these key aspects of quality of life. So the vision and these together kind of function to guide the overarching document. Questions or comments on the vision and planning themes component before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation?
Okay, I think this is the way to do this. When we talked about that the very first screen, we talked about affordable housing and workforce and those kind of premier balanced growth, abundant affordable housing, employment opportunities. In the next month or two, we are going to be having people coming in from the Housing Authority to give us some background and what it takes to get something to move through the Housing Authority system for your Section 8 housing or any other kind of work that they do. The next screen you had your ag. We're going to have the planner, the head planner from Kane County coming in for their ag, to talk about their ag preservation and the work that they've been doing on that. And we're also going to have, I think it's Catherine Jones will be coming in with the workforce board, because there is an ag program at MCC coming up now where they will be working together, and that will be promoting workforce and what's going on. And those are the kind of things I can fill you in on. Or if you have an idea of somebody you would want to have come in to talk about a certain subject because it's going to affect all this, then please let me know and we'll get in contact with those people and keep going. Thank you, Brandon. Oh, Scott?
I just want to commend you, Brendan, and your staff. I think both the vision statement and the themes were very well put together, and I think it was tough to consolidate everything into a 4-page document, but I think you guys did a great job, except for one sentence. And I don't know if this is
Butter you is always better.
and maybe this is a philosophical, maybe it's just a wordsmithing, I'm not sure. But under sustainability, which is on page 4, I was rooting on, and then I read, as the county continues to develop, will discourage sprawl, instead prioritizing development on the outskirts of its established municipalities, which in my mind, that is sprawl, right? Establishing development on the outskirts of municipalities is sprawl,
Yes.
and it's maybe a different type of sprawl,
Yeah.
right? And, and I get you what you guys were trying to go after here, but maybe it's just changing that sentence slightly to make it more clear.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That's a poor choice of words, because if you read the recommendations, it's really about infill first, and then kind of smart growth, edge development as required, basically. So I think, yeah, the way that reads is probably misleading.
Just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. But again, nice job on everything here.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any less flattering commentary?
Yeah.
And the peanut gallery.
Yes, just 2 comments. One, I think that this is a wonderful vision for the future of the county, but I think there ought to be an acknowledgement that some of the things we're visioning here are things that the county as such really has very little impact on. And abundant affordable housing being sort of the lead one. We want most of that housing within municipalities.
Right.
And we have very little authority, we have no authority to, other than being a bully pulpit to encourage them to do that. And the other thing is in the paragraph on the agriculture industry, you talk about that it will thrive, that it will provide jobs and fresh products. Other than agritourism, jobs in the agriculture industry are vanishing, and in farming specifically, they're going to approach 0 over the next 20 or 30 years. I mean, more and more. I saw a television program a while ago about a guy who lives in Wichita and farms several hundred miles away and does it entirely remotely. The only people who actually live on the farm are people who repair the
Fix
equipment.
the equipment.
All the planting and everything else is done from his computer via GPS. And that's going to become more and more the case, and I think that there's just isn't going to be a lot of employment in the farming industry in the future.
Well, I think we can definitely get to that as part of the overview later about ag. I will say, I think one of the things we're trying to push in recommendations is to get more of a multiplier effect from ag, so it isn't completely kind of larger ag without that effect. So that's something we can talk about, I think, with Ron, but I think we want to try to do as much as we can to make that happen, I guess. And also, that sentence, I think that phrase is really designed, again, to champion that ag still is very much a big contributor to your economy, even though it might be waning, and are there things we can do to shift that?
I'm not saying that you should diminish its impact on our economy. It's just the number of employees, I think, are
Don't
going to
overstate
decline
jobs.
over the next
Yeah,
20 years.
That's fair. And then as to your first comment, I think you're absolutely right. There's some things in this vision that the county is not the lead role in. But I think we're also trying to, and this is probably gonna be a conversation for all of the recommendations tonight, right, is what's the balancing act we wanna do with the plan being a vision that's really set for the larger region and to help promote coordination, right? So we have to kind of, it's a delicate
Well,
act.
I think we have to promote these things, but I think we also have to tip our hat to the fact that we do not have the authority in those areas.
Scott?
Or maybe better yet, define in this plan what the county could do
Right.
in the affordable housing sphere. Maybe that's funding. Maybe we provide funding to the municipalities that encourage that type of housing development within the municipality.
And we do to some extent.
Correct.
Yes, there's a couple of key projects in your ARPA funding recently. that
Exactly.
the
But
county's
maybe
funding.
being more
Yeah.
clear in that respect. What is the county's role?
Yeah.
What's not the county's role?
Right.
Yes.
And I will say, that's
That's
one of the things we've started to outline that we didn't deliver to you guys, but we've been thinking about role and kind of implementation timing and priority. So we definitely do want to make sure as we refine this, kind of what are the buckets where the county is leading the charge versus kind of complementing municipal efforts or something in between.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I think we,
sorry. Did
Eric,
I
did
thought
you
I
have
saw a
something?
comment.
No?
Okay.
Perry? Okay, let's,
I do have, and what I'll do is I have a few things that I've noted as well, and some of them were getting at, like where McHenry County will offer abundant housing. It kind of gets back to that, just rewording things like that, will offer employment opportunities. In that last paragraph on page 1, you say repositioning, and I think that's a term that's used. Are you meaning repurposing, or are you?
So I think in the context, if I'm recalling this correctly, because I don't have that piece in front of me.
That says, farmland will be protected from development with development focused in the repositioning of previously developed areas along the McHenry County's major roadway corridors.
So what that's, I know we use it in a couple different spots.
Yeah.
What we're trying to say is it's a mix of kind of targeted reinvestment where it's actually new development, and it's also kind of adaptive reuse. It's kind of how the collective bag of tricks in changing an area. So I would, in particular, an easy example would be vacant commercial corridors. Repositioning could be renovations that are adaptive reuse of the existing retail center as well as a new building in the outlot. So that's a mix of two different things happening on the same site, but it's kind of changing how that site functions.
Reconfiguring or reconfigurations
Yeah,
or something
so-
like that?
Um,
Okay. And the only thing, and then I think there was something in here that says, like, in the very last paragraph, additionally, the community will supply alternate transit networks. So what, I think part of what we need to do, because this gets tricky, right? Because it's a plan proposed by the county for the county as a whole's potential, right? So sometimes there needs clarification about what we mean when we say the county is doing this or the county is doing that. Are we doing, if we are trying to envision something more countywide, we're talking about in collaboration with our partners, we're achieving this, or we're promoting this with, other agencies or whatever it is. So a little bit more clarification on what is meant by county and what we're referring to.
And that's something we can work with staff to maybe have consistent phrasing. I think we tried our best, but it's a lot of pieces fitting together, is county the big C or little c? Like, are we talking about county government or county as a place? Community,
Right.
like that's a phrase we try to use to kind of signal that, hey, it's everyone, it's not just county government. So it's saying we're county community or the community. So I think we can work through what are those 3 or 4 kind of place reference phrases to use consistently. And again, we tried, but maybe we can memorialize that with staff and make sure we all agree on that definition.
Thank you. Okay? One more.
One more comment. So one of the top things that I wanted to discuss tonight was actually around one of the themes. I was very pleased with the themes and felt like they really matched what we had heard from the public, the sustainability, public health, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I would like to see more opportunities to weave more diversity, equity, and inclusion into the plan. And so we can talk through like some of the ideas that I had in the appropriate sections, but I just wanna kind of put that out there so we can all think about places where we could add more depth there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly the kind of input I think we're hoping to get from this group, is you guys are the McHenry County experts. So if there's things we haven't thought of or things that we could bolster, absolutely. So all ears, yeah. And again, I think we've this, I would say collective comment for this document is this is our current best shot based on our understanding. It needs to be informed by your expertise though, and that's the role of this meeting and this group, is you guys are resources for us to make this better. I know, I mean, obviously we'll work on grammar and stuff like that, but minor stuff. Big picture though, you guys are a resource for this effort. You know, we've been hired to do this to kind of take it most of the way, but we need your help to kind of make it a complete plan.
Thank you. Did you need more?
Yeah, no, I just had questions, because I haven't really been involved, and so these themes are coming from what you've gathered from public inputs.
Yeah, I think they are also included in the RFP, to be honest. So there was discussion about these themes even before we got brought to the table. I think coming out of previous efforts, and I think what we've seen is the engagement's very much supported the need for these.
Were these the only themes that were included in the RFP?
Yeah.
It would have been the RQ.
Right.
Right, so that's
Sure,
more
yeah.
about qualifications. So did we specifically state what the themes are going
So
to
the
be?
requested scope of work discussed some themes, but also
Okay.
discussed things like the need to include agriculture as a chapter, the need to include green infrastructure as a component. So like it outlined kind of the topics that wanted to be addressed by the county.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So I really like all the pieces of the vision statement, but when I think of like a vision and a mission statement, it's like very much more concise. And so when I saw like a lot of sentences that kind of go through each one, I kind of think of those as more of like maybe values versus like a vision statement. I don't know if that's like, usually to me a vision statement is like a sentence, like here's our vision for the county.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is how our firm's always done them, is kind of a couple pages worth of, it's really, again, that big picture summary of this is what we're trying to achieve across multiple topics. I think what I'm hearing from you, like, is almost like a mission statement that you'd read, like the county has a strategic plan, and there's like a sentence there on the front end, right? So this is what I think we thought we communicated about what we delivered, so sorry if we overshot. But I'm glad, generally sounds like we hit the mark. I think, yeah, if there's a need for something like that, like a mission statement, we could definitely try to boil this down for a front-end chapter to say, hey, cut to the quick, here's a sentence or two that says what we're trying to achieve.
Is this one page, the whole mission statement, or was it 2 pages?
It was, I think, 2 or 3 pages in that deliverable. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't want it to be longer than a couple pages, but I
Right.
think it needs to be more
Right.
than a paragraph for what we're trying to achieve here.
At least a paragraph for each thing that we find that we need to be concentrating on. And then it ends up being like 4 mini visions. But if we'll still be talking about this until 8 o'clock. So when we start getting deeper into it, we can have more conversations about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now for the, again, main event here. we've received some input from all you all ahead of time. Again, thank you for doing your homework. I mean, we wanted to get this to you a couple weeks in front of the meeting to make sure you could digest it and give us your commentary. We basically have looked at what you sent us and have a list of about 15 items that really kind of rose to the top from your perspective of where we wanted to focus our time tonight, organized under each chapter. We're calling these the MIC-H top priorities. So we've got that phrase up there, but basically, as we go through things, if you see anything in the slide deck with that little yellow and blue badge, that means it's something you guys flagged, and we want to kind of help you guys steer the ship. So we've got about 15 items. Again, basically, these are all the goal statements from that key recommendations memo that you all have. So really, everyone wanted to discuss the land use kind of section writ large for the most part. In housing, there's an emphasis on expanding housing choice, looking at how we grow strategically, and also talk about kind of preserving ag land at the same time. And then the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods came up with several of you. So I'm just giving a quick overview now, and we're going to dive into each of these. From an economic development standpoint, the kind of first goal really stuck out, and a couple of you really hit on the railroad expansion item. That's coming from another county plan, that, just so you know, so it's not pulled out of nowhere, but that's something that some of you on the flag. Green infrastructure, there are a couple goals, the conservation of natural areas and open space, and improving stewardship of natural areas. And then in ag, really talking about non-farming use of ag land and promoting soil health are the two main goals we're going to talk about there. And then transportation, Scott, want to talk about all of them? That's okay. There's a couple other folks that did too. And then historic preservation, there's a couple comments in there, I think especially around the rural crossroads and kind of the approach for the land use there. So we're going to kind of walk through each of these. Basically what we have before each of these major bullet points, we've got a couple of slides of existing edition just to remind everybody kind of set the table for the topic, and then we'll dive into each of these. Again, we're going to be asking you to help us through the conversation because you all have read this and have some thoughts. So we're not going to read every single recommendation. We're going to kind of ask you to cut to the quick. What was the comment you had for this section? So land use and development, we're starting from existing land use that we've inventoried and used county's data to verify. Basically, we've looked at 12 different land use categories as a starting point for the land use framework. And the first goal section that you all highlighted was balanced growth and development with preservation. One thing before I forget, we have this white sheet over here and a marker. If we're working through this and something comes up that's not really on topic, but we want to make sure we come back to it, that's our parking lot. So we'll park your idea on that white sheet, and then as time permits, we'll come back to it with you all. If time runs out, we can follow up with you after the meeting to make sure we have that conversation. So the balanced growth with development preservation, and the first goal in the land use component was flagged by several of you. In particular, looking at the green infrastructure resources, kind of in alignment with growth and development was flagged. I mean, again, the kind of big picture goal here is we're talking about how we promote growth in strategic areas. We talked about this edge growth concept a little bit earlier. What's the right balance and tone to strike between recognizing expansion and new development are desired and should happen, with also recognizing we need to preserve ag land, we need to kind of celebrate and integrate these green infrastructure resources into things. So some recommendations kind of framing out the broader approach to land use, but in particular the green infrastructure piece was highlighted. So anyone with comments about this first goal that we wanted to get into?
Really two comments. One, we have a very large number of zoned and unbuilt lots in the county in unincorporated areas. So many that I think it ought to say somewhere in our plan that we do not recommend approving many, if any, new ones. And the residential growth, I mean, somebody wants to buy 40 acres of ag land and put a house on it, we permit that by right, and I think that that's fine. But we have lots of 1, 3, 5 acre lots, I mean, hundreds of them out there that have been approved. And I don't think we need any more. Second, something that I think is very important to the zoning board is something that was said in the 2030 plan, and I think needs to be said in this plan, and that is that isolated rural subdivisions are not a precedent for zoning and should not give authority for new adjacent development near them. That's something that has come up multiple times since the 2030 plan, and I think that it needs to be written down again.
Are you referring to Plum Tree?
Not just Plum Tree.
But it is.
It is one of them.
Can I ask you to explain that a little bit further? About what you just said about the developments next to the other, I mean, just explain that a little bit further. I might have missed part of what you said at the beginning of that.
Yes, well, there was a zoning hearing a week ago
Okay.
that there was an old 10 or 12 house subdivision,
Oh, okay.
probably 45 years old. And this was in an agricultural area across the street from it, where there was no other housing anywhere around except this, and it was, a guy wanted to build a house on it. I think that we, based on that, because the subdivision did not constitute a precedent, he was denied.
Okay.
And I didn't feel bad about it because within 2 miles of there were at least 50 5-acre lots that he could have bought.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
And maybe 150.
All right, thank you. I just
John,
was,
back those real quick. The unbuilt lots piece, that's something we have talked about with staff. We have paper records for, is it 700?
Around 700.
Around 700, so that's something, we'd love to map it. The problem is you need the manpower to actually digitize all those paper records and get that done. That is something we definitely have heard about as an issue, and, I mean, based on everything we've heard, yes, we should have something in here that says that, I mean, that's death by paper cuts to add, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so that kind of chopping up all that contiguous farmland is not a good thing, based on
Yes.
everything else the group has prioritized. So I think the group would agree based on that. And then I guess the second item you mentioned, the rural subdivisions. So, I mean, that's a form of leapfrog development where you've got, even though just because you've got one low-density subdivision out there that snuck in a while back, doesn't mean you need to have more of them. So I think based on everything that else we've included in framework, I also would agree. I don't know if the group wants to discuss that comment, but I mean, that's a very key recommendation, though, right? You're basically saying, like you said, this is not a precedent, we don't want to encourage this kind of development, we want to encourage smart growth.
Yes.
We can all agree on that? Do you think? Or is that something?
I have a point of clarification. Is that, Charlie, are you saying that what's outlined in here is not sufficiently communicating that?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and whether it's in this or in a couple different spots, we can definitely make sure those comments get incorporated in this.
Please do that. Thank you.
Other comments on this goal?
Oh, I will also tell you in this section for green infrastructure resources and the, further down, Elizabeth Kessler from Henry County Conservation District is going to be making a presentation on preservation. So that, again, so that we have more information after what we hear from the people who are doing it. So if somebody sees something here that they want to know, I can either tell you or we can find somebody to make sure that the word is out and we can get more information for Brandon so we can make more deliberative answers. Last one.
One other thing, I think we should, and I know that this is a little bit forward, but I think we should have somebody present on 15-minute neighborhoods. Because I think that would be interesting. In fact, on my Instagram feed today, the Washington Post has an article on 15-minute neighborhoods, and I think that would be.
Send us a link, please, and we'll make sure to get it out to everybody so that we know what it is.
And that is one of the key topics in like 4 slides.
Exactly, I believe it, but I didn't want to forget to tell her that if we had somebody speak on that, I think that would be really interesting. Because I think that's a way to draw millennials and younger too.
So the next goal under the land use umbrella was coordinate with county municipalities and townships on future land use and development plans. And again, really speaking to the earlier comments about what's in the county's purview versus what's in municipalities, this is about kind of, yes, we're setting a broader regional vision, and we need to coordinate as a group to make sure it's implemented. So a couple of the key recommendations that were flagged by comments were establishing a regular kind of planning forum to discuss related future growth and development, and then also coordinating outreach efforts kind of between unincorporated and municipal neighborhoods as kind of development is being proposed. So, but again, really, this is to emphasize the need for that kind of interjurisdictional coordination. I won't include that in the plan, that phrase, not grade level, but yeah.
Well, we have in the past, I mean, throughout your recommendations, and I agree with it, it calls for a lot of future things to do, and I think it would call for maybe not of this size, but an ongoing plan commission of some sort, which McHenry County has never had before. I think that would be a very good idea, and I would suggest that this group recommend it to the county.
What was the phrase you used? A what plan commission?
An ongoing one.
Ongoing,
You know,
yes.
whether
A
it's
standing
new
regional
turnover
standing-
annually or
a standing
whatever.
commission.
But we just have a standing plan commission that meets going forward and does whatever planning needs to be done then.
Yes,
Just,
I can, okay. Perry, and then Carolyn.
The term, when you had coordinate outreach efforts between unincorporated and municipal neighborhoods, we should try to develop some type of partnership with your ongoing,
Yeah,
yeah. And the partnerships, I remember when the mayor of Crystal Lake annexed all the car dealerships along 14, and the county partnered with them to share revenue.
yeah.
And those concepts, I think, should be developed in our, and again, that's like trying to communicate with the municipalities, so we're not just the county telling them what to do, but we're partnering with them.
Absolutely.
I was just for clarification on the first one, it says establish a regular forum. Don't we already do that with MCOG? Isn't there a planners group?
There's only been a couple of meetings, but she
But-
has initiated
But it's
that.
already been initiated, so,
Sure.
yeah, so that's something we can, recognizing what we're already doing and make sure we include
It
that.
is so far at least kind of ad hoc though, and
But
Yeah,
we're
that's
starting.
could use some structure.
Right, and I would say
Yes.
probably the second half of the sentence is more important as a goal, because the first half, yes, we've already been meeting as a group, but then we really have only been talking about kind of what's on the table right now as current proposals, rather than talking about future growth.
Yeah, and I would say like build on efforts, current effort, build on those efforts to see that going
Yeah.
forward. But anyway, recognizing that already started.
And one of the kind of items we talked about in working through this recommendation with staff was, Kane County Planners Forum is a very well-branded and attended kind of entity, and they do, I think, a great job of educational events and things like that, so it's kind of thinking about, maybe is that something we can emulate here, or with McHenry County Spin, but they get great attendance at their events, and it's about kind of the professional development outside of stuff that maybe happens in the city core, so.
Ellie?
So I see that the last one is flagged by the diversity, equity, and inclusion thread. I'm just trying to follow why that one's different than the other three listed on this plan as well. I feel like either all of those could also apply to DEI, or the last one isn't strong enough, or I don't see the connection. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just me wanting more context to it though,
Yeah,
why that's labeled.
That's fair. I think as we get into developing this piece more, one of the things that came to mind was making sure there's very purposeful community engagement
Mhm.
around some of these key issue areas. And I think also making sure you're targeting disinvested parts of the community
Okay.
as part of that.
Mhm.
So it's almost like it's engagement, but with a DEI lens, I guess.
Okay, so like a broader level. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm not sure I gathered that from just that fourth.
Sure,
Cool.
yeah, and that's, we kind of, how much detail do we give you guys
Right,
versus
yeah.
what's in our heads, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I very much support like the additional explanation of it,
Yeah.
like I think that would be wonderful to
Yes.
have in writing.
Okay.
And as we dig dive deeper. I need to take my Prevagen more often. It's just, Lordy, we'll get to that. I just want to make sure he gets to this overview so
Yeah.
that we can get down to one at a time, and then we can use more of our efforts in that. Oh, it is here, okay. I'm wondering what you want to call it. But it's, we'll get there.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if we can massage this by adding a few words to strengthen that, that's,
Right,
yeah, totally fair.
okay.
I'm sorry, any other comments on this section? Again, if I do click too fast, just say, hey, actually, the comment, we're trying to be mindful of time and volume of content here. So this is really a one-liner, but coordinating municipalities on potential annexation in unincorporated areas. So this was flagged by a couple people when you want to speak to it. It's kind of in line with other items that we talked about.
I didn't flag it, but were you waiting, was somebody,
Nobody
Yeah.
else was.
okay, so I'll jump in. I didn't flag it with you, but I feel like this opens up a conflict of interest, especially in situations where there was more than one municipality, like if we're guiding annexations, I mean, that I see as some of the development isn't occurring around like 47 and other areas, I mean, the municipalities are growing, they're moving. Right? And if there's a parcel of land, I don't know if the county really should be involved in which community gets it.
And I don't think we could do that. Municipalities are going to be a lead on this. For potential annexation, I know that whole line along 176 going out to 47. For a while there, it was a land grab on who was going to get what properties. So Crystal Lake connects all the way up to Craig's Woods. And then it was Huntley wanted to have something to do with it, Lakewood wanted to have something to do with it, Woodstock wanted to have something to do with it, and we really, once they decide to do it, as long as they can do it, there's, we don't have a lot of ability to coordinate, but it would be nice to know
Well,
what's going on.
the one area where we can help is when there's a conflict among municipalities, we ought to stay out of it as a county.
Oh, yes,
But when the issue is helping encourage the landowner to annex when there is not a conflict, is an area I think we can help in.
yes,
Yeah, I think this is also trying to recognize, and kind of that last point, you've got a future land use plan we're putting together. It's, by its nature, it's trying to influence how things are developed. It also, the language in the paragraph though also really stresses, really kind of, hey, this is a strategy that ties with all your infill areas. Basically saying, the county's saying, hey, you've got these pockets of undeveloped, we really want you to try to focus development there if you can. So it's really just some way of tying a message to the map. It could potentially be lumped into another kind of goal area instead of being standalone, but I do think it's worth saying.
Scott?
Just food for thought. So I'm looking at the land use map that we were given today, and in this sentence, the urban infill areas and the fringe development areas are basically treated equally, right? We're encouraging development in both of these areas. Could we, or does the group think that prioritizing urban infill areas before fringe development areas could be talked about as part of this goal. Is that a worthy cause or worthy thing for this group to sort of push? You know, looking at this map, I think a lot of people, when they see this, the fringe development areas, they're kind of surprised, like where's rural agriculture going if this is where we're talking about fringe development, right? So, just food for thought, I'm ex officio, but I wanted to throw that out there just for kind of consideration at this point.
Yeah, I would have a follow-up on that, just, because are these fringe development areas, what are they now? Like, are they ag? Could they be ag? So how does that work with, a few slides ago, back to really slowing the growth and preserving the ag?
So, and the land use framework is gonna be the next thing we get into.
Oops, sorry.
But, no, that's fine, because it all ties together. We're using the language in the key rec memo that goes with these phrases, so that's fine. Those areas in the orange, and I don't know if I want to slide ahead, but I mean, the areas, basically those fringe areas in the orange on the map, basically are the areas potentially in play based on extraterritorial jurisdiction. This is not a recommendation developed. This is basically saying, these are the areas we need to examine as we talk about new development. Like, this is kind of the areas that are served, or potentially could be easily served, proximity to municipal boundaries. So it's not a recommendation, it's more like it's a framework. It's basically saying,
It's a fact.
this is the bubble we need to, basically where we can have agency to make sure we're developing growth, having development occur in a way we want it to. So that's definitely part of the implementation there, so.
Garrett?
Yeah, I think just maybe a small amount of education would be helpful here. So Adam and Renee, if you could describe just really quickly how that current bubble functions in, you know, if there's proposed development in the county that's just barely outside of one of our cities, we already have some framework in place to communicate that kind of development now. So maybe that, some education would be helpful. So what do you guys do now when something is proposed just outside Woodstock, for
So,
example?
yeah, Charlie can weigh in as well, but when something is proposed in that area, the first thing we do, and in our staff report, the first thing we do is go to the municipal 1.5-mile jurisdictional planning boundary and look at what the proposed land use plan is for the municipality. And if there's conflict, we put both of them. And the township plans, we put all those plans in our staff report. And then when it goes to public hearing for ZBA, the ZBA takes those into consideration now.
And we look very carefully at whether there have been or are not comments from the municipalities or other planning jurisdictions. And I think there is a very substantial majority on the board that ordinarily would defer to a municipality that wanted it annexed rather than adjacent to it. And I think that's as it should be.
And in the office, when someone comes in, we met with someone last week that was talking about doing a development that was adjacent to a municipality. And they said, do we have to go to the municipality? You don't have to, but we highly recommend that you go to the municipality and see, you know, they might be interested in annexation and they might have an offer for you. So we always advise people when they're close to go to the municipality and talk to them first.
And there's also some triggers. The health department will have some within 1,000 feet of city sewer. There'll be I don't know if it's an automatic annexation or if it's going to be, you need to approach the municipality to have that discussion because you're going to be required to hook up to that system one way or the other. Right. We do see some of those triggers as well.
So one quick question on that, develop on that?
Last one.
Last one? All right, just for
I'm not
clarity.
trying to be pushy, but we have to kind of.
Move along.
So if they annex, then does that 1.5 miles move out?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go.
It can go
There we go.
It can go forever.
It will go forever.
It can go to hell and back. It's unbelievable.
But there's also, if that happens, nothing the county can do for state legislature, right? I mean, that is what it is. So, Okay, so encourage sustainable land use and development best practices. Again, as we're talking about, and this gets more to site level, as development's happening, if it's happening in some of the areas designated within the land use plan, to encourage things like conservation design standards and requirements, implementing the sensitive aquifer recharge area or SARA overlay district, encouraging kind of best practice from a design standpoint on site, looking at things like limiting impacts of prime soils and productive farmland. So with all that said, the main comment we got, I think, was around the conservation design requirements piece, but any discussion on this item? The good news is the county's already doing a lot in this realm, and this is basically saying, keep on keeping on. Okay. Housing is next, and then after housing, I think it's economic development, and then I'll stop talking and we'll get to hand it off to the subs for a little bit. But housing, again, just kind of some background reminder, growth is really slowed. You can see in the bar chart on the right, only going by 3,000 to 4,000 folks in the last decade. Meanwhile, housing values, again, have decreased slightly while rents have gone up at a pretty good clip. Looking at the cost burden rate in the county, 1 in 4 owner-occupied units are cost burden, and nearly half of rental units are cost burden. That means collectively, you've got a fair number of people in the county that are struggling to afford their home, spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs and utilities. So again, it's about 1 in 4 for homeowners and half for renters. So with all that said, there's definitely apparently a need for a change in the housing stock and what's being provided in McHenry County to make sure that housing needs are being met with the homes that are being bought and rented. So, fair number of comments on this item. Expanding housing choice, allowing for greater diversity in unit size and acreage to better fit different needs in residents. Looking at quite a few strategies within this section, really, I mean, the underlying assumption here is, and belief is that if we allow for a greater variety of housing to be built, there's more flexibility in the market to respond to needs, and rents will be more appropriately scaled to demand, and prices hopefully will stop going up as much as they are. But again, trying to use housing diversity as a tool in addressing the kind of housing gap that exists. And so items in particular that got comments were removing barriers to reinvestment in existing housing, encouraging the development of ADUs, ancillary dwelling units or accessory dwelling units in the A1, A2, again, kind of reinforcing existing tools, and then partnering with the Housing Authority to promote affordable housing development in key areas. So there's, again, a few comments on this. Who would like to go first?
I'll even actually make a comment on this one. Years and years ago in Woodstock, there was a gentleman or a group who wanted to put up a building. It's on 120 and, goodness, it's that road that kind of goes in between that and 47. Irving. There's an apartment complex there now, and they wanted to put another apartment complex for, I guess he had a mom or somebody who was old, and they thought this would be good. You had a good place to get to it, but the ordinances at that time in Woodstock would not allow for a 900 square foot unit. Everything had to be more than that, and so that never happened. The land's still empty, as far as I know, and it could still be developed. So if the community, the municipality could change their ordinances to allow that kind of change, not that you will, but
I think you can get down to 600 now.
you can?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a whole bunch different than it was, but that was the case at that time, that you couldn't do that. Well, everybody wants a 5-acre lot, but that's useless now. You want to put as much house as you can on the smallest piece of property that you can. And that makes more sense to be able to do within a municipality, and how do you take care of it, and what's gonna be the cost. But this in particular was for, at that time, low income or for senior housing. And that was then. So that's the kind of thing I think we're talking about when we're saying encourage subdivision regulations, to encourage a mix of housing types and where they are and what they're doing.
Similarly, so, I have a, two family, my daughter and my niece, one lives in Brooklyn and one lives in New Jersey, and I was looking, if you look in New Jersey, they have, they didn't have a ton of senior housing, but you know what they had that I think would be good is condos. So, like, I live in Sun City, Huntley, right? So, like, they have condos and activities and for seniors, and I thought, you know, often people want that, right? But also, then the senior's house is available for younger people. And I thought that's really a good, plus, not only that, is it less land use and it meets needs for the age. Also, that helps the school, they were paying about what our house is and also, property taxes. So there wasn't like a cut on the property taxes or the house, but, they were happy in those, and it freed up housing. And I thought to myself, I don't really remember seeing too many of those. I mean, I know they're in Illinois, but they had them all over the state of New Jersey. They have condos, like kind of what you're talking about, Mary, and I thought that could really be beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that is the intent, I mean, whether it's owner or renter, I guess, but the intent is to try to foster that diversity, so it's not just single-family detached, and not just huge multifamily complexes, but the stuff in between as well. I think the language we included in this section, again, we're trying to lean more towards what's happening in unincorporated areas, and you do have subdivision regulations, so someone could develop here. Let's make sure if that's happening, we're getting a variety, even though we are encouraging annexation to some degree. Let's encourage that diversity.
My question, it's really more of a question because I am not entirely sure. With the ancillary dwelling units, I know there's a big trend with, they call them granny pods, where, if you have like a plot plan, you can, with your residence on it, you can add another residence for a relative, presumably. And so how much flexibility do we have currently in the county for that? And is this something that we could add to also encourage, or do we feel like it's adequately included in here?
We do have it.
Okay.
In 2018 is when it came to be in existence, and there are standards for it. 900 square feet maximum, 2-bedroom maximum. That's for detached, but interior. So that, and they're allowed by right, in the
In all residential districts.
Oh, great, okay. Cool.
You just gotta get through the health department here on South
Okay.
and you're good.
Okay, one of the things I want to mention is, some of these things are national problems. The high price of housing is a national problem. It's not just a problem of McHenry County. And so I think that has to bear that in mind, that this is not anything unusual right now in the United States. These housing prices are unbelievable. And I think too that, okay, we don't need so many 5-acre lots maybe, because you don't have that many people who are good at large garden farming. Well, in New Jersey we call it truck farming, but I think a 1/4 acre though, which was common in Freehold where I live in New Jersey, people had 1/4 acre lots, and then you could have pretty big gardens, because I think McHenry County is a really strong county for small scale farming, and also just people who have smaller lots, but they have grapes and berries and whatnot. And we all see them at the farmer's market all the time. And so I don't think that we should be pushing people into apartments, which is really not something Americans like very well, being piled on top of each other. That works in some countries. I don't think it works in the United States. All we have to look at is some of the enormous failures that, you know, we've had in this country with these huge. Did you have something?
Well, yeah, you can continue, but I would like to comment on what you're saying about apartments.
Oh, you know, like, all we have to do is look around though at practically most cities, and you'll find that. And, I mean, I don't have anything against multi-family housing, of course, you know, but in New Jersey, we also found that, like, garden apartment styles work better than high-rises. That's another thing. So.
And I don't think we're saying high-rise apartments everywhere in McKenna County. I think we're just saying encouraging. Right now, it's most of the development that's happening is single-family detached or the big apartment complexes, which we need both, but we need the stuff in the middle as well. And I think it's recognizing that ownership is really hard these days. Like there are more renters in this country than there ever have been before. The dynamics of household makeup has shifted dramatically as well. So there's the percentage of single person and two-person, no kids households is really high now compared to what it was before. So the need for a 3 or 4 bedroom house is very much waning and in the minority. So there's a shift happening nationally that's being felt locally. And so I think what we're saying is, yes, maintain single-family character, but also encourage this kind of sensitive or gentle density in other areas too. So quarter-acre lots, but also maybe some row homes or townhomes in some of those blocks, or a small apartment building at the corner, kind of talking about a variety of housing within a neighborhood context. That's the spirit of what's here, at least.
You can look next door at the Sonatas. They have, the perimeter is all single-family dwellings. They're all families, they've got little kids, and huddled in there is this place called Maples at the Sonatas. And they have a bunch of quads, so that there are 4 people to a unit, and a bunch of those, and then they now have courtyard homes. So they're single-family homes, but you've got next to no yard, and you can take care of it. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths for all of them, and it works very well. Lipstick on a pig.
Sorry, I think I stepped on you were gonna
And
comment.
yeah, I did too, never
No,
mind.
that's okay, it's still there. I do agree that the housing is a national crisis for sure. We need more affordable housing, but we should recognize that McHenry County is higher up there. As someone who's just moving, looking in Kane and DuPage, they have a lot more affordable housing. So it's true,
Yeah.
it's all over the country, but trying to find something in McHenry County that was in the same range, Kane and DuPage just specifically had a lot more availability online. So I think that's something to recognize.
Don't forget, most of DuPage County also has access to Lake Michigan water.
That's true, I just
We
mean
don't.
affordability.
You know, the water situation is a huge situation here in McHenry County. And the water requirements itself are almost it's a way of putting the lid on extensive growth and what you're talking about. Because we lived in DuPage County, we lived in Naperville for years. And Naperville, we spent a fortune on getting Lake Michigan water in Naperville. We used to call it liquid gold. But they have that now. And that makes a huge difference. And I don't think anybody should forget that water, Mary McCann has been emphasizing that as well. But the water issue is really, really important, and that is.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
in a little bit.
Okay, just so long as, you know,
Yeah.
you recognize that it's an underlying truth about residential growth, especially residential growth.
Just a quick comment, don't forget, like the senior housing I was talking about, they're not high rises. They're 3 or 4 stories and they're condos. And I think there's a beauty to them, but there would also, I don't know what you all think, but condos for young people, I mean, they need a way to build equity they need a way, to build instead of paying rent, to start, and I think, I'm not talking high rises, but it also is better for land use, especially if it's in areas that are, need maybe redevelopment, like I think Huntley's trying to do one in the Caddy property, but anyway, that's just a thought. We have to think of building equity.
Fair enough, yeah.
Thank you. Brandon?
Yep.
Please?
Next one, encouraging growth in strategic locations to meet demand while also minimizing impacts on farmland. And so, this was hit by a couple people. Again, the main focus would have been the second item about really kind of walking that fine line between sensitive aquifer recharge areas and highly productive farmland, and kind of where that meets with expansion if needed. Commentary on this one. Moving on. All right, and I know this has come up, so now we're here. Supporting creation of 15-minute neighborhoods, and this gets into now kind of walking that line between what's happening in the county versus what we want to encourage, I think, within areas that potentially could be annexed, and also how do we improve existing neighborhoods. But the concept of the 15-minute neighborhood has been around for a while in planning. Clarence Perry talked about this decades ago, it's been over 100 years now. And urban planning's really come back to this idea, especially in the wake of COVID, and the value of open space, the value of having things in proximity to your home. Really, at the end of the day, we're talking about how do you provide a variety of housing, green space, schools, the things you need for kind of daily life within close proximity to your home. I think the 15-minute piece of it needs to be a little bit flexible, so we can't just focus on it, it's only walkable distance. I think we need to recognize that people do bike and drive a lot here, but I mean, how do we promote more of that neighborhood node concept here in the county and encourage that? And so that's looking at a blend of things. We put it in housing, but really it's about kind of the neighborhood unit as a whole and encouraging that diversity in housing along with all the amenities that people are looking for.
Brandon, did you identify areas in the county where a 15-minute community could be developed?
Not yet. That's kind of, so the land use framework basically says, these are all the areas where we could do something like this. Now we got to kind of drill down to that next level of detail. And that's kind of what the next several months are about, is kind of how do these policies land on the ground in the county.
Because the municipalities seem to be forward-thinking on that, and they've actually partnered with private concerns like Lutheran Services to develop Green Gables, or is that Gables or something like that? In Crystal Lake behind, by the Ace Hardware?
Yes.
On Corporate Drive?
Yes.
Okay, they take a portion of your Social Security and they prorate it, and it's for seniors, and 15 minutes you walk anywhere. You don't need a car there. Okay? Because that concept, that reminded me of your 15-minute thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that sounds like it hits it spot on. You want kind of, what can we do to make it, I use the phrase complete neighborhood sometimes too. So how do you make it a complete neighborhood for community?
Well, I am a strong advocate for this, but I think a starting point, the county is advocating for municipalities to do this. Our municipalities, by and large, are not walkable, and we need to encourage sidewalks and other places you can walk to places, because in most of the municipalities, if you try to walk somewhere, you're taking your life in your hands, because there aren't there not only aren't sidewalks, there aren't crossings of the major arteries that are really safe for pedestrians.
Right.
Or bicycles, or horseback, or anything except your car. And you have subdivisions all over the place that are right next to each other that are not connected one to the other, where you have to go out on the arterial to get into the next subdivision.
And I think that's the application we're talking about here, is like, how do we take this concept and apply it in McHenry County? It can't be the rigid urban model that they teach in planning school. It needs to be the idea of how do we provide amenity-rich areas to residents and make them safe to get to for the most part. So, I mean, it could be as simple as, you've already got some established subdivisions, are there opportunities to punch trail connections through in any areas? Are there
Yeah.
opportunities for local serving commercial nearby to help kind of round it out? So it's taking that and applying it. And actually, we just did an analysis at work, kind of for a planning conference we're gonna be attending, and we did the Clarence Perry model, we actually modeled it out, and even that model is about a 20-minute walk. So he couldn't even model it correctly. Now we have network analysis, we can kind of figure this out, but like, it wasn't even diagrammed correctly back in the early 1900s, so like, we know it needs to be adjusted for context. So that's definitely, I think, the next part of fine tuning this is saying, yes, we agree with this concept. What is the county encouraging? What, hopefully your municipality's on board. Municipalities we've been working with seem to be generally, I mean, infill, good. Maximizing tax product, or tax base, good. So I think all of this helps achieve a lot.
Can I make a quick clarifying question?
Sure.
When it says promote the development of 15-minute neighborhoods, that doesn't mean starting from the ground up, developing neighborhoods. It means using material, like you said, connecting subdivisions technically.
I think it could be both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean.
Because like using what we have to build off of 15-minute or 20-minute neighborhoods also is included in
Yeah,
that?
how can infill help kind of
Okay.
improve existing areas? And as you talk about new development, we
So
should be
both would
encouraging
be in
this.
there.
Just like we're talking about encouraging a variety of housing in your subdivision regs, do we also want to encourage this kind of concept?
But we should be encouraging it, but both of these concepts will be largely within municipalities rather than in the unincorporated areas.
And to that point, just to help frame this issue, you know, we keep coming back to what is the role of the county, right? The RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority, just completed a plan, a strategic plan for their agency. How they structured their plan was they had 7 action items that the RTA is within complete control to implement, and they had 7
Advocacy.
I'll bring my preference for you next time.
which the RTA has no jurisdiction to implement whatsoever. They rely on other partners, governments, other agencies to implement, but they still feel that they deserve to be in their strategic plan.
Yeah,
This could be something where it's both an action and an advocacy item in that, and we define what each of those look like.
Good
Maybe the
point.
county could,
Mhm.
we don't have sticks to force municipalities to do stuff like this, but we do have our carrots, we have funding,
Yeah.
right? And we could say, there's funding for sidewalks, there's funding for trail connections, and maybe that's our role, is encouraging in that way.
Excellent,
So,
excellent.
just food for thought,
Yeah.
to help structure this
Yeah,
session.
I think that's exactly right, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can apply that same logic to a lot of the things that are sort of quasi-county roles. Housing is just one aspect of this, obviously.
Yeah, infrastructure is sort of the heart of what the county can help with.
Okay, so economic development, again, just really looking at how do we make the county more prosperous over time. Again, the change in household incomes here, median household incomes increased by 18% over the last decade. And workforce development's really been hit on hard in our engagement with the community. So, no asterisks on this one. Let's see, we'll skip to that. I guess, oh, it's because it's related, sorry. But encouraging commercial and industrial development in strategic locations, again, around that balanced growth thing, but like focusing on commercial and industrial. The main item that was touched on here was about the Union Pacific Railroad. Again, so I will just say, this is basically coming straight from your SEDS, your economic development strategy, that there was a 3-county effort adopted pretty recently. So we wanted to try to mine other planning efforts as part of this, and that's where that came from. But,
Could we add in some sort of safety, like promote safety upgrades and, you know, utilization upgrades or whatever it is, you know, that they need to do, include safety in there somehow? Because I think that's like where all of our minds went to, you know, we don't wanna be promoting more like unfettered freight
Sure.
movement.
So promoting upgrades, including safety.
Good idea.
as part of
Yeah,
that.
that would, yep.
Okay. I should note, Sam and Tricia, you're taking very detailed notes right now. I'm starting focusing on this now. All right, any other comments on this goal?
Okay, food processing, are you including slaughterhouses and other agricultural facilities such as milk or?
So this would be the food processing kind of employment sector, so it's a big bucket that would include lots of those. And again, this is coming from the SED, so we'd have to confirm definition they're using, but it is a large kind of multi-employment cluster.
This is something that's just in a very, very early stage, but the city of Harvard and an investor group are exploring the possibility of an airport that would accommodate jet aircraft, which would be a
Horrible idea.
massive economic development driver if it went forward.
On the Motorola property.
Yeah, really.
No, that's,
The white elephant.
that's not flat.
Okay,
We might bomb the Motorola property.
so is it like an executive airport of sorts, or?
Yeah,
what's the-
it's acquiring a small airport that exists
Yeah,
and enlarging it so
Okay.
it could be an economic development.
Yeah.
I mean, if this went forward, it's probably a multi-billion-dollar project, but it's just in the first feasibility study phase.
okay.
Who's pushing this?
The city of Harvard.
Okay. Just, we've already got Rockford with hugely upgraded facilities that they have. And also,
Well, this would not be for that kind of aircraft, this would be for
Executives.
executive jets.
well, it just, like, I'm just thinking in terms of, like, we've got O'Hare, where the jets come in really low, here over at McHenry County. And no, maybe not as low as the executive airport. I mean, I don't care whether they do an airport or not, but, frankly, but, there are an awful lot of airports, around.
Well, the feasibility study presumably will say whether it makes sense or not.
So this will be one we have to kind of just kind of watch as we go through the next 6 months and figure out how we want to incorporate or to what degree
Yeah.
support in this plan versus recognizing Harvard's kind of jurisdiction there. Is that fair? Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something.
Oh, I was, but don't worry about it. I
Uh,
have plenty to say other.
So we're going to shift now to a couple other topics. Agriculture will be first, and we've got a couple goals with each of these other items. Ron, you mind stepping up, and I got the pointer here for you.
Can I ask, please, that we have 5 minutes for everybody to go to the bathroom or get a glass of water or reposition
Okay.
stuff so that we get our sea
Thank you,
legs
Mary.
for the next hour and a half? See what we got?
5 minute break.
We only have half an hour left.
I hit one of the. This requires me to step couple.
I'm not required, Charlie, no.
Oh,
You may.
That's okay. I had a friend who had
I don't know how to pause the recording, so nobody's saying anything you don't want recorded.
makes next to no noise, gets up and going fast. It gets up to 42,000 feet, which is higher than commercial planes. Those are the ones you see or do. So this kind of airport, if it says it's going to be with planes that are, number one, well kept up, because they have to be. Number two, they are going to be for use on short trips. I would think that they would be transcontinental. It takes an awful lot of fuel to get around and can't afford that fuel. So some of that may be true, but I would think that if this is out that way, it's a transitional, because now you can have, not only, well, if they're talking about it being an executive airport, you can see you need room, a lot of room, but I don't think you need that much more than
For
golf
senior housing in
was.
Crystal Lake.
It's that big, but some extra because you need a longer runway. But other than that, they're not that loud. Running that off.
Social Security is prorated.
I don't know
That's how it works.
But I was bringing it up on a comment.
Yeah,
I
and
have
so
seen so
that
many.
location, you can walk 15 minutes
Or
anywhere.
Target, Sam's Club, like I used to,
The
like,
bank.
drive, the bank is
First
right
of all,
there.
Right, entertainment, you know, so the
So
whole thing.
we had that happen out in New Jersey, we
It's
had
a
that happen
private
in
concern, Lutheran services.
Now, and now that Peatone,
they
they
do
want
stuff
one
like
down there at Peatone, because you have to
And
have places where
I
smaller
just don't
craft
know where
workers, they
15
can come in, they can
community
move into Rockford without
Well, I'm
paying.
not sure, I'm not understanding.
Now, what I wanted to do was find that sheet that I had of
In the middle of
everybody's.
things already.
Eric or David, can you hear us?
That shows
I mean, I think it's a good thing, but 15 minutes
see it when I get it.
We
and
have to
also-
partner with the municipalities. We have to keep them, I like what Charlie said, ongoing. You know, we partner with them.
Well, you end up with a sheet here, but
That's right, we can offer exercise and funds. That's what we can do.
And that's what the county, yeah.
And then with this, we give them some ideas, but, you know, let's have a cohesive plan that we can all trigger.
Right,
Right, break it up, bust it up.
I agree.
Every subdivision
Any
should have, if there's anything, should have a trail connection.
I don't know.
with
Let's just see if we have
stub.
more comments on this in the next sections, but I'm worried. I don't want to say too much.
With we need a better public transportation.
It's like, hey,
Yeah. Well, we need a lot of, like we were saying, like we need better ability to walk in the municipalities and bike, like, I don't know, and like what I want to know, this is just personal research, I need to go figure out is how many other municipalities allow old houses to be converted into
They can't, unless they got 25,000 people, you
I
can't do
know, I see a
that.
ton of them, because I know the answer, because I see a ton of those in that stuff. So like Crystal Lake, and then just picture, like, I don't know if they do that, 8-foot houses.
Yeah, I read it too, and I thought, well, that would be interesting,
Like that,
usually you have to
or, you know, not be
25,000
invested
people.
in apartments that, I would know one of those where it wasn't really old, it was a house, and now it's a tiny little apartment, but it's supposed to be people want to or that house feeling, but
And they don't want the infrastructure to cover it, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess that's.
no.
That's right.
And not every place is.
The only issue with Blue Valley is because they don't have infrastructure to bring it to and then they if I go out and Monday Township,
Living apartments, I could rest my time and not feel like
their stuff, but it's so they kind of end up being, I used to live right by there, so this is what I'm going to make sure everybody gets. As this is the anagrams, as I've been going through these, I wrote them all down. So they met. So I always go back to CCAC, Technical Advisory Committee.
You're ready.
And then on this one, these are it's the use of land for both ag and solar. Also known as low
Come out in the way.
I'm an Englishman. Well, it's in these are the things that I want to know what they mean myself, because I don't know what the process is.
Yes, all the, my grandparents actually owned
A missing year.
association,
So everybody else.
We have the ball.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're covering all that stuff. I think there's a lot of concerns that I understand that. But I think tonight we're kind of going through it and getting it better. It's more of maybe not tonight, but the next meeting is like that. So we'll be sure that we presentation but that's what I know. This is something that I know that we're sitting so you're going to have to figure out
Then the county fills in the gap before Huntley?
Take a breath.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
It gets to, once it gets to 166, you're.
Okay, so forward.
That's it.
Okay,
Okay.
so I'm Ron Dunn with Solutions on Land. I've met most of you, I think, last time, some new faces. So just briefly wanted to go over again kind of these current conditions in agriculture in McHenry County. McHenry County is blessed with a lot of small direct marketing farms, kind of agritourism farms. And what we see across the country is where you have a good base already of those farmers, they tend to grow, they tend to cluster, and the demand seems to stay up. And so it's a really good opportunity. And I also, as far as existing conditions, that conventional farmers are doing well in McHenry County. You have a lot of really good farmers. And I just sent Brandon a picture of this last night. There was a large conventional farmer north of town here that's been spreading lots and lots of compost on the ground. A lot of the farmers have got edge of field conservation practices. So there's a lot of really good things going on in McHenry County with existing farmers. But we do want to acknowledge that the climate is changing a bit and it's presenting some challenges. We're getting these real heavy rainfall events. I'm an agronomist by trade. We look at 5-year histories in counties. We'll see extended dry periods that we didn't used to have, and then we get these mammoth rainfalls that come in, and they're a challenge to deal with. In terms of economics, the large farmers have really embraced technology to reduce labor, and there's not a lot of labor hours going into producing a bushel of corn anymore. On the small operations, that is an opportunity to create jobs, create some economic growth. And then housing becomes an issue, particularly in the small operations that are expanding a bit. So when we look at these opportunities, certainly the energy markets, we heard a lot in our listening sessions about the solar panels coming in, and we know all about Illinois changing the ruling a little bit on siting solar panels and windmills. But just the intense competition for land, competition from not housing so much anymore, but from doing energy or building other infrastructure. And the USDA has been really behind funding cover crops and edge of field practices that I mentioned, and these other practices that are going to change a bit of how we farm. So go to this. Back up a little. So we kind of broke our thinking down into the county being able to guide conversion of farmland or suggest conversion of farmland for other farming uses. And the other big bucket is conversion of farmland to non-farm uses. So somewhere in there, the renewable energy, they're trying to make solar panels a temporary use of land, and it can be restored to agriculture, but I don't see a 50-year lease on land as being anything but out of farmland. So we see an opportunity for the county to provide some guidance, some support for conversion of practices on keeping ag land, just farming in a bit different, and in a bit different way, and also evolving, some of the small scale operations more. But then in the conversion of non-ag use, there certainly needs to be coordination with water and what we're doing with water, how we're managing water, and how we're going to get water infiltrate back into the ground. We're currently involved in doing a study for McHenry County business, the Midwest Organic Recycling at McHenry. We're doing a water infiltration study, and it's a 2-year study, but we hope to have by the end of this year the impact that putting 2 and 4 and 6 tons of compost per acre will impact water infiltration, and that's something that all scales of agriculture could adopt. So that's where we're at.
Well,
Is
so
that a
to
good
go back to
thing?
the previous slide you were just on, so one more back. One more back. So I guess regarding the guiding of kind of development for non-farming uses, questions around this goal. This strategy was highlighted by a couple of people.
Well, I have a question as to something that you said there, and I want to make sure that I understood it. You were talking about, I'm assuming like solar panels, and that then it's not, I can't remember what you said, is it then not ag land? But like in McHenry County, we're innovative in that we have the ordinance or whatever it is about having native plantings, which is actually renewing the soil. And that could also help with flooding. So could you, what were you saying again about if it's, like, so let's say there's solar panels on ag land, and aren't those like 30 or 50-year leases or something like that, right?
25, 30,
Yeah.
50-year leases, and then we don't really know what the useful life is of those solar projects either.
Right.
But it's probably closer to 25 years than it is 50. So what I was saying is the county being able to help guide conversions of farmland to other agriculture practices. So
Okay.
right now, we're looking at solar as continuing agriculture. If a farmer's out raising an acre of corn, he's got a single use for that acre. So he's got 100% utilization. If he puts solar on there, plants native plants and has pollinators and also native plants that can be grazed, we've probably got about 225% utilization of that acre. So in McHenry County, of the ag lands left, I don't think we can continue just to look at one use for that acre.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Thanks for
And
What-
then,
What about wind? Are we adding that into the plan?
I think, right now, the renewable energy is being talked about as being solar panels or wind. And I don't know where the wind is at, but it seems that the solar panels are moving much quicker at this point.
Yeah. Generally, McHenry County isn't specially adapted to wind turbines.
That would reduce your impact on your farmland though, right? Because if you put solar panels on there, it's much more difficult to farm that land. Whereas if you put wind turbines on there, you can still continue to farm.
It depends on how the installation is managed. So if they're elevated higher off the ground, there are some crops that could be grown beneath them. But grazing is actually quite successful because there's some synergies there. The cattle like the shade in the heat of summer. But the other thing that is a clear and present need in McHenry County, and that is to recharge the 70% of the drinking water's shallow sand aquifers in the county. Those are recharged from the surface. And our deep aquifer has depleted significantly, but if we're going to recharge those aquifers more efficiently, we need to get some of our farmland infiltrated a whole lot more water. And is there another?
I think this is the last one, so again, regarding kind of into that last comment, any questions or comment about this promote soil health, erosion abatement, and water harvesting?
With the first one that's flagged, is there a reason that we're not saying Illinois natives instead of deep root perennial crops? Because I mean, that's basically, you were just talking about Illinois native plants.
Right.
And specifying that, I mean, might be really, really crucial for, water retention and stuff like that, because that's what Illinois natives are meant to do, and that's basically saying deep-rooted perennial crops, but if we said natives, maybe that's a little bit more specific.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think, within RCS, they'll have a specified list of plants for this specific area in McHenry County. But yeah, they will be essential to help infiltrate water, but also be able to support a livestock. And then if that land comes back out of solar panels in 25 or 50 years, yes, that soil will be regenerated tremendously, as opposed to some of the solar farms that are going in now. They fence them, they have muddy pathways in them, and they grow up in weeds, and they just come in and spray weeds. And so, if those farms can be guided a bit more, and I'm not sure, what restrictions can be put in place, but it's going to be the best thing for the landowner. It's going to be the best thing long term for the citizens of McHenry County. Yes.
Does A1 cover what you just said, zoning?
I don't know.
And do we still have the 10% set aside in McHenry County for farmland?
I don't know.
Okay.
Nancy?
There's a concern about, I know there's a lot of concern about grazing with solar panels. I worry, well, one, I would want to make sure that we still have deep-rooted native plants, because that's what's that's what made our soil what it is, and that's, we want to regenerate that, but I would even be concerned with the safety of the animals, you know, and that then natives wouldn't get planted if we have grazing under the panels.
So we're going to have to combine several different concepts. We need to combine native plants for grazing. And we also need to combine rotational grazing of those native plants. So hopefully we'll be able to get the USDA in their conservation practice codes that they currently have on the books and they currently pay farmers to do. They could continue to do that even with the presence of solar panels in the fields, if the solar panels were elevated high enough. And we have a case study in Oregon where they elevated the panels 8 or 9 feet. There's no safety issues, there's no interference issues. They're grazing native plants, and there's a lot of design support for that kind of installation.
Under the new legislation, do we have authority to require that?
Right.
Well, under the new
Yeah.
legislation, the natives are required. The state
Yeah,
has
I
always
know,
encouraged
but it's
that.
the state list of natives, not the McHenry list. But what about requiring them to raise them so that we can graze underneath?
That's something that the state hasn't looked at yet, this whole idea. This is kind of an emerging thing, this agrivoltaics, they're calling it. And it's kind of emerging, so that's one thing that we have discussed. I would like for you guys to give us as much information about that as possible, and maybe we could be a leader in
So we
establishing some of that.
haven't been denied the authority to require that as a
Yeah.
zoning
They
board.
haven't contemplated it yet at the state level.
Don't tell me.
And that's why I was soft on answering those questions. That law is so new. They passed a law like that in Indiana, and about 16 counties rebelled, and they rolled the law back, and they changed it. So I'm not sure what's going to stand in the state law if enough counties push back on it.
Well, I think that the solar developers understand that too, because I was just sharing with Adam, we have 3 new solar farm applications that came in the day the law went into effect. We've gotten 3 recently, and we expect 2 next week.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, is right.
Wow.
Would you repeat that? What'd you just say?
We have 3 development applications for solar farms.
Yeah.
That came in the day the state law went into
I
effect,
heard that,
limiting our restrictions. And then since then, we've gotten 3 more, and we expect 2 more next week. So that's 8 that are in the hopper.
On
just
top of the 5 we already have.
On top of, we only have 1 that's in the
I mean,
process.
in existence.
Well, we have 36 that have been approved.
Wow.
What about putting the solar panels on buildings instead of all the massive, back in the 70s, we used to put them on the buildings, on a house or on your barns or whatever. Now, they're hogging up all this land, rather than putting them directly on the buildings. And
We don't have the authority
done.
to deny them.
What?
We're stuck.
Yeah, we don't have the
We
authority to
can't deny
deny
them
them.
anymore.
One more
Are
comment on.
are we asking you for permission to
Well,
speak? Is that
I
the
was
process?
hoping, but
Okay.
no, that's okay.
All right,
Pat,
great.
can you mind, Michelle?
Yeah, I just had a question about the recommendation to facilitate carbon crediting in support of McHenry County agriculture. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Okay, so I probably touched on carbon crediting in our last meeting when I did existing conditions, and I didn't speak to it tonight because there is so few farmers signing up for the current programs. And Indigo is about one of the main players out here, and they're not able to tell farmers when they're going to pay them for their carbon credits or how much they're going to pay them because they want to market them first. and they're amassing a lot of expense in assessing the carbon credits and then verifying that the farmer carried out the practices for those carbon credits. Also, I've talked to Tom Vilsack's office, and they are considering in Washington DC rolling the carbon credits into a national USDA program where the local NRCS FSA will evaluate the carbons and certify the credits. If they take that over, we're in a completely different ballgame. As it stands today, if farmers are growing corn, they're probably not going to be able to claim carbon credits. And they're not gonna quit growing corn. So if they can grow corn in a different way and have a process, if a ton of carbon credit is worth $80 today, about $10 makes it back to the farm. And the rest of it is in administrative costs, basically. And so farmers are saying, we're not gonna do that until that turns around and we're getting a fair share. If it was a matter of signing up at the FSA office and having someone from NRCS come out and check, maybe $10 an acre is enough. Maybe the farm will settle, for less money. But they're not going to follow the practices that are currently prescribed for carbon credits. So it's kind of a dead issue. Okay?
Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, Dennis, you can come on up. So we've got, again, a couple of slides about existing conditions and then a couple goals and key recommendations. Left and right.
Thank you. Okay, green infrastructure and active recreation is, I guess, the extended title of this section. I think in terms of existing conditions, we talked a little bit about this last time, we know that McHenry County has been a leader, both the county and entities with the county. We've mapped through, this is the green infrastructure vision mapping here, we've mapped areas of sensitive nature, we've mapped, or we have mapping of Illinois natural area inventory sites are the best of the best ecologically remaining sites. The McHenry County Conservation District has mapped another sector of high quality areas. We have a mapping of oak woodlands, we have an aided wetlands advanced identification study, so we have probably the best information of any county, I'm guessing, in the state on green infrastructure. In terms of protecting it, one thing we've established in our communications with some of the open space agencies, we have already protected about 80% of the highest quality Illinois natural inventory sites. We've protected a little over 50% of the McHenry County natural inventory sites, so we have a lot more to do. And the other part of the equation is it's not sufficient just to protect these lands, we have to manage and steward the land. So we have a big problem with invasive species, so restoration's a big challenge, reintroducing controlled burning, that kind of thing. So that's the first part of the issue statement. The other aspects of this include the fact that McHenry County has been a leader in working with local governments, and we need to kind of continue that. So looking back to the 2030 plan, these are some of the things we identified as issues and opportunities. So we need to do a better job of getting out to the municipalities, working with the municipalities to develop conservation design ordinances, similar to what the UDO has. We have a couple that already have done that, so that's great. That's a good starting point. We need more communities to adopt their own localized green infrastructure plans. And right now, we've, I think, developed 3 municipal plans in the county. Only one of the municipalities, and that's Crystal Lake, has actually adopted that plan. And there's also an opportunity to develop some extended rail connections. Just as we were developing this process, we actually just found out that the County Division of Transportation has worked with the mayors to come up with a new excellent trail-based transportation initiative. So we're just, kind of touching the surface on that. So that's kind of the background conditions, existing conditions. We're going to hit on tonight 2 of the 6 goals and associated initial recommendations. So in terms of conserving these sensitive natural areas and open space, the first key recommendation is we need to continue to rely on public agencies probably to do the heavy lifting. And we've also identified, I shouldn't say identified, but brought in the goal that was in the previous 2030 plan that the target should be 15% protection of open space and natural areas in the county. So that's something for you to consider. Is that a good goal to continue? Is it sufficient? That kind of thing. In terms of acquisition, the challenge is, I think, the recommendation is initially to prioritize those areas mapped in the green infrastructure vision, particularly the Illinois natural inventory sites, the McKnight sites, aided wetlands, remnant oak wetlands. And then another key recommendation, I think we're realizing we can't all do this through public agencies. We can't just rely on the conservation district, which is protected 25,000 plus acres, which is already 5% of that 15% goal. We need collaborations with various entities, public and private. The Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge is a good example of that, the cooperation between Fish and Wildlife, the Conservation District, the Land Conservancy, Open Lands, and there's probably a few other agencies involved. Another example, Lynn and I both serve on the board of the McHenry County Conservation Foundation, which supports the Conservation District. We just acquired a 160-acre former Boy Scout camp, Camp Lakota, I think was probably noted in the Northwest Herald, and it was done without tax dollars. It was done through a grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Foundation, contributions from Illinois Audubon. There was a joint partnership with the property of the adjacent landowner through the Conservation District to put a conservation easement on it. There was money to actually restore that land up front. So again, this is all collaboration through multiple entities to make something happen that's going to be good for the public, but not paid for necessarily with public dollars. Not to say that that's not also critical. Beyond conservation, I'll just touch on briefly, the second goal is to improve the stewardship of natural areas. And one thing we need to do, and we've already started to try to do a little bit of this, we don't really have really good data, assess what the quality of our existing lands is. We know if you look around the county and you're familiar with things like buckthorn and honeysuckle, they're all starting to green up or will be in the next few weeks here. It's all over the county. So we're not doing enough. There's definitely a big challenge there. And so we know that the key agencies like the Conservation District, the Land Conservancy, they know how to do it, but they probably don't have the existing resources. They really need to kind of beef up their budgets to do that better. We also need to work with public education to get the word out in terms of managing municipal properties, park district properties, HOA properties. Some of the HOA properties that were originally designed as natural areas, wetland mitigation projects, they're really kind of a disaster right now. So we need to do a lot more work there with education. The county can kind of be a forum maybe for making that kind of education and collaboration work. And I think that's about all I'm going to say on that. There's probably a few other minor bullet points. Again, we're focusing tonight on 2 of the 6 major themes, just to kind of get you, a flavor, get some initial reaction before we get into the details.
Just flip back to the previous one, maybe we can see if there's any comments. Again, that first one about the 50% target was something that was flagged by at least a couple of you, so I don't know if there's any other discussion or questions about this one.
What is the total amount that has been preserved by all organizations?
Great question. I went back to the 2030 plan. We didn't actually have that number. We haven't preserved a whole lot since then.
Yes.
My belief is it's around 7 or 8%.
Okay.
Between the Conservation District with 5%, the Land Conservancy, actually, they're a private organization. They've got either ownership or easements on 2,500 acres, that's another 1%.
Yeah.
You add in park districts and other municipal natural properties like Crystal Lake and Woodstock and Algonquin have. So we're probably in that 7 to 8% range right now, so we have a ways to go.
And the HOA disaster, is that largely that they can't enforce the cost of what should be done, or?
That's part of it. It's a little more complicated. And actually, the county UDO really got into this, I think, very thoroughly. You were probably part of the review process for that. So basically, it's having performance criteria, it's having required covenants, it's having a required institutional arrangements in terms of budgeting. So if a new HOA comes in, or a new HOA president comes in, or a board, they say, we're tired of spending money on this. Well, guess what? If you don't do it, you're going to get punished. Well, punished is probably too strong a word. You will be subject to maybe takeover by the municipality through an enforced, what's that legal provision called? Anyway, it's in the covenants. It allows them, the municipality, to come in and then take HOA revenues to manage that property to meet the performance criteria.
But there are a lot of those that don't have those requirements
Oh, yeah,
existing
it's the
already.
majority that do not have them right now. So again, that's an example where the county, Crystal Lake, Woodstock, Algonquin, that have those kind of provisions built in, they can be the starting point for getting the word out to the rest of the municipalities in the county to make sure that actually happens.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
So, just so everybody's aware, as soon as you have open space, the taxing abilities for that open space go from whatever they would be to is it 2%? If farmland is 6%, then open space is a third of that for assessment properties. So if I know a couple people who have the big Christmas tree farms and have a lot of that. Well, that's all open space. They have restrictions, things they can do. If they sell it, somebody has to pay the taxes that would have been on it for the previous times. But there is a financial component to this that we have to be aware of. Because if they aren't paying it, somebody else is. So, where are our tax dollars being best spent? That may be one of them. In a sideways kind of way that people wouldn't notice, except that their tax bills keep going up. There are a lot of things that happen on that, but having 15% taxable in Lake County, almost that much, too.
In terms of open space, you mean?
Open space?
I think we're maybe, yeah, it's probably in the same ballpark.
Okay,
yeah.
so, if they can handle it, I'm sure we can handle it too. It's just something to be aware of, that when we're going forward with all these recommendations, they're all going to be wonderful and fantastic, and we have to figure out who's going to pay for it and how. And telling
Yeah,
us.
just a real quick anecdote on that. Again, we'll put this kind of information in the plan. In my HOA, we manage both turf grass, we hire contractors to mow it, and we have 20 plus acres of natural land. We pay at least 4 times as much to our contractors per acre to mow and herbicide turf grass as we do to manage our natural areas. Algonquin did a recent presentation, field trip on what they're doing in some of their natural land, same thing. They hire outside contractors to maintain their public lands, 3 to 4 times as much to basically mow turf grass as it is to manage natural areas. So the economics are entirely in favor of the green approach, so we just need to get the word out in terms of how to do it, get the institutional arrangements in place, so there is the funding built in, there is the fallback. I think the term I was looking for before was backup SSA. So you've got a special service area, you don't need to milk it up front, because you don't necessarily want the government to be managing that. But if the HOA doesn't do it, then you have the legal remedy to make that happen. That's-
Just to add to that anecdote, on average for turf areas, especially in like commercial and industrial, they visit the turf to manage it and treat it 28 times a year. And good managed natural areas that are established, it's anywhere from 3 to 8 max. So it's just a huge difference in travel time and treatment and chemicals being used. So I was just adding to your anecdote, yes.
And it's much better for the environment.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to,
I was saying, there's one other goal here too, but yeah, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I think this is what McHenry County prides itself in, is its open space. And so I guess when I saw the 15%, I was very supportive of that.
Yeah, I would make a motion if it's appropriate that we stick with the 15%. I proposed it in the 2030 plan,
Okay.
so I'm in favor.
Well, that sounds, okay. We'll put that down on your whiteboard on a recommendation so we don't forget. That's one thing that we want to do, Carolyn?
Well, I would just add that, I don't want to take a lot of time with it, because we'll be talking about this again, and we'll be talking about the 15%. But when we talk about loss of tax revenue, we do have to also factor back in the economic advantage of having open space. The tourism dollars is part,
Yes.
it's an economic driver. We get our return on investment in open space is so much larger than we give it credit for. We keep calling it green infrastructure. I'm gonna maybe touch on that at a later time, but and just in terms of that green infrastructure, the flooding, the helping mitigate all that, our return on investment is much higher than what we lose in tax dollars, I believe.
Okay.
And I would argue that the 15% is, I know we're at the green infrastructure plan for the county was 10, when it was way, but I know that their strategic plan went up to 15. So originally that green infrastructure plan that's out there, it was 10 and now it's 15. There is this concept of 30 by 30, right? Which maybe is a part of a discussion later now because it's a little bit out there and it takes a few minutes to explain. But there's value in, 15% is probably minimum, right? It may be all we can get, but we should have that conversation at some point.
And the other thing, to your point, we'll be having a dialogue back and forth between green infrastructure, which is basically protecting undeveloped land or retrofitting developed land, and ag protection. So we could certainly acquire more ag land and convert it back to prairie and wetland, but there is that trade-off. So I think that's maybe where the 15% came from, and also just the economics of who's going to pay for the acquisition of open space. In some cases it's contributed by developers, in other cases it's, through tax dollars, through park districts and conservation districts. So there is that trade-off.
Well, then you might add into that public agencies, private organizations, and agricultural conservation easements, because we will have to rely on agriculture to be part of that 15%. If we're going to meet, at some point, or even on larger number, but there's, that's just a.
Not to get into the weeds too much, but it's a matter of definition. We specifically kind of drew the line between ag and green infrastructure in terms of defining it. So if you add up ag easements and that kind of thing, it could get significantly beyond the 15% for sure.
Right. And I just want to make the note that I was playing devil's advocate here because those are the kind of things that you're going to hear from people.
Right.
And if it's true, that's again, when we have our people coming in the next couple months making their presentations, that we can dig down deeper into those to make sure that we have the information to be informative when it's the county fair time and we're all spending time working the tables and people come in and ask us questions, we'll have answers for them.
Yeah, and it's been almost 15 years since a successful referendum to raise money for the Conservation District to acquire more land.
Right.
And I don't see it happening this year either.
No.
I think, as you know too, they're just about ready to pay off those bonds, and so moving forward, unless they do something, there's going to be a pretty massive tax break for residents because they're not going to be paying to pay off those bonds. So a question the district is considering, I can't speak for them, is do they go back out for referendum, not necessarily to buy more land, but to generate a revenue base to do the management of the land they've already got. So that's, stay tuned, and if you talk to Elizabeth Kessler, she's a person to ask about that.
We'll have her here. Melissa?
There's another question.
Yeah, I don't know if this question is gonna make sense, but I'm just wondering, so is there some kind of calculation? You had spoken about the recharge of the aquifer by converting ag land, right? Is there some calculation where if you go from 15% to 30%, that return on investment with the recharge to the aquifer? Does that question even make sense?
Again, that's one of those complicated ones. If it's kept in ag land, if the soil isn't compressed, if it isn't paved over, it's still serving a very valuable recharge function, depending on the soils. If you make the conversion, the prairie with deep-rooted native vegetation, that enhances it even more. It gets to be a really technical evaluation. You could use hydrologic modeling and things like that. So I'm not sure we have the answer.
Oh, okay.
But I think we do know that just leaving it in ag alone is a huge benefit to the county. If we can make the next step and convert it, some of it, to naturalize deep-rooted vegetation, that's even better for the landscape in terms of runoff volume and water runoff.
Because I think that itself could be a return on investment. I don't know how you would really
measure.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but recognizing that we're dependent, if there was a way to say, you can get more by doing this, and
There are calculators out there that have done that at the regional level we could tap into, but we haven't done that at this point.
Well, I think it would be difficult to have a single calculation. As you may recall, I was showing profiles. Some areas are 100% or, 300 feet of silts and clays. You're not gonna get the recharge in those areas you are, that's 100 feet of sand and gravel. So it's a complicated equation, but
Okay.
generally speaking, these are called ecosystem services, and they are, somewhat quantifiable.
So we could do a little back of the envelope, estimation. So for each percent of organic matter, you can hold an additional 16,000 gallons of water per acre.
Wow.
So we have about 200,000 acres of ag land in the county, and if you just, put 2% more organic matter in the soil, you got 32,000 gallons more water per acre. That's a lot of water.
And that's in the soil.
Yeah,
And-
I just, hearing that to me is like very powerful to help make the connection for people, what can happen when we do that.
And it's a really good point, Melissa, and just also put on the back of the envelope, how much is it gonna cost Joliet to get water from Lake Michigan, which we never wanna do. It would be better if we treat our land better, and we, that's, how many billions are they gonna spend, or millions, right?
The pipeline itself is $1 billion.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so,
Okay,
very good point.
moving on.
There is an example over in Van Buren County,
Back over.
Michigan, just across the lake. Coca-Cola has a bottling plant where they bottle water, and Coca-Cola has taken a lot of grief from pumping all the water out of these communities. So they went and they put a program together where they paid farmers $20 an acre to add a third crop to their rotation. And they did the calculations, and they went back to the DNR and the powers to be and said, look, here's how much water we paid to have put back in the ground, and this is what we're taking out of the ground. So, we can get to those numbers, and we were talking a little bit about having some infiltration overlay zones, but by and large, we have enough volume of farmland. If we just can get farmers to raise the organic matter, it's gonna help a lot.
Thank you.
So we're gonna move on to
Dennis?
transportation, is that all right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we do have Eric Russell on the line from KLOA. I'm gonna do my best to walk through their content. Eric's available for some of the Q&A, but we'll start with me kind of working through this first. So just looking at quick snapshot, existing conditions for roadway. 83% of county residents drive alone, so we have to recognize that's the context we're working with here. Forecasted that with household and employment growth, trip generation for daily trips is gonna increase by 45% by the year 2050. So this is pulling from the numbers that are feeding the LRTP. And Scott, step in anytime I misstep here. Transit has been hit on a ton in engagement, and it clearly is kind of a demand from the community, at least in conversation. And so just recognizing that the limited public transportation limits, therefore, ridership levels and increases reliance on auto and traffic. So it's how do we, recognizing that it's auto-dominated, recognizing the densities we're at in the county, how do we provide transit and help kind of increase demand for transit by providing more and better quality transit. And then there's things, you guys have great resources like the metro lines that run through the county. We've heard about increasing kind of ridership or increasing service along some of those routes in light of what's happening with the Kennedy. I drove through it today, horrible. We gave ourselves 3 hours to get here just in case, and then we only had a half an hour to spare. So, so yeah, metro is a good thing. Bike and ped again. 73% of county roads lack sidewalks. So we talked about the need for infrastructure besides just roadway, like lane miles, and that speaks to that. And definitely need to continue to look at sustainable transportation alternatives, like EV and car sharing. So there's a handful of actions that got flagged as part of that group review. They basically fell under every single category. We have the complete slide deck kind of for transportation here. So I'm just gonna briefly touch on these, and if there's no commentary, we'll move along. But the first bucket, really we divided this section into kind of the primary components of transportation, right? So focus more on the roadway network, and the first kind of goal looking at active transportation, pedestrian and bike and transit and the other goals. So I guess any areas of particular comment or discussion regarding this kind of first larger bucket about roadway transportation planning?
Go back. One. Does Pat, is what you were talking about, to work with roadway agencies, IDOT, MC.dot municipalities to incorporate bicycle pedestrian facilities and public transit shelters in roadway improvement projects? So it is, as soon as you get to a certain amount of funding and where it is, and Scott can get back to you later on that, it's a requirement to have those kind of things. It's where you put them and how extensive you make them.
Okay, so they, for a while there, they banned them.
Right.
You could not use any of that money for any kind of trails or anything.
Yeah, now that's some of it, am I correct on that, Scott, or almost? Somewhat?
I can follow up afterwards, but the difficulty is we got 29 cities, 17 townships, IDOT, the county. We all are different agencies with different policies and priorities, right? So just because the county adds bicycle facilities to our county roads doesn't mean Greenwood Township is gonna add it to their
Correct.
roads. And so, it's really, again, it takes a collaborative approach among all of these different jurisdiction agencies to really make a dent in this problem. And I'll point out too, with transit, transit is a big issue, we all know that. But you can't talk about additional transit without talking about density of housing, right? You need about 8 to 9 dwelling units per acre to make fixed route transit work. Even in our southeast part of our county, we have a lot of neighborhoods with quarter-acre lots, that's 4 dwelling units per acre. So we need to double our density, even the most dense part of our county, we're not even halfway to making transit successful, right? So that's the challenge here, and people, I want more transit, but we also need to recognize that it's a land use problem first and foremost. It's not a transit problem or a lack of transit problem. So, just thought I'd get on my soapbox there. Sorry.
Thank you, I rely on.
You've done a wonderful job with transit at the county.
Yes,
I think
yes.
so. I
Well,
think
but the
so.
reason we have dial-a-ride is exactly for that reason, is because our land use agencies have not made it a priority to have transit-supportive densities in our cities, right? Had they made different decisions and had corridors that supported transit, we would have a different transit system than we have today, which is, today it's a demand response system that costs a lot more per trip than a fixed route bus would cost. It's because of the land use decisions we made as an agency or as a county back 20, 30 years ago.
So on that phrase, like transit supportive density or transit supportive development is something that ties back to the previous commentary about elite neighborhoods and housing variety too, right? It all kind of other discussion points on this first transportation goal before we move on to the next one? Transit options, so we kind of just spoke to this piece. Any additional discussion on transit in particular? Yeah, so there's a couple slides for each of these, they're dense. One of the things we are gonna do as part of the kind of, I think, tightening up of this one is transportation, because we have a kind of pretty rich library to pull from. It's got some pretty specific recommendations, so I think we're gonna recognize that some of these maybe fall under a slightly higher level recommendation we can make, and these are the details that go with them. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at as we kind of reorganize this. You notice this section had many more recommendations than the others, just because of the nature of the data we had.
Well, on that last slide, I think something that needs to be added to the last point is I'm all for an electric fleet of vehicles, but we have nowhere near the infrastructure to support an electric fleet of vehicles presently, and until we do, there's no point in getting them.
So it's not just advocating, it's investing in the county-owned infrastructure
Yeah.
to charge your vehicles.
To charge the, where we need to have it, because the limited charging we have is mostly not for commercial vehicles and is in a very particular part of the county, not throughout the county.
Yeah, I think this would be a county-owned fleet, right? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a side note, do you know that Representative Foster said that at Argonne Lab, I believe it is, there's a national study group to make, they're working on making EV batteries way more efficient. It's that's something going on in Illinois, you know, that, so basically what, if I remember correctly, it was like EV charging stations are not gonna be, if they're successful, they're not even gonna be as necessary as they are at the moment, you know, as we think they are at the moment, because they're really putting a lot of scientists and stuff, and universities are collaborating there to try to make them super efficient.
Well, can I add to that? I think we had a discussion about that, about having the charging infrastructure, and you guys might remember. I don't think the idea is to have a fleet that has to be charged during the day, because that's a lot of downtime for staff. And the idea was that EV fleet would be a vehicle that would be used during the day, would be brought back and charged here overnight. So, because otherwise, you're gonna go off and I don't know what they're gonna do while they're charging it. So the idea was, for that to be implemented, it would have to be viable. It should still be a goal, right, to the extent that we can do it.
Right, any other comments on the transit goal?
Just really quickly, one thing I didn't see in here was about the commuting patterns at all. Initially, the data that was preceding the actual goals mentioned that we've got a certain percentage of numbers that, that drive, a single vehicle car, but we also have less than 50% of the jobs in McHenry County are filled by McHenry County residents, and we have around 70% of McHenry County residents that leave every day. So there's a tremendous amount of commuting that's not going to fit this type of narrative perfectly. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, well, I mean,
I'm not sure exactly how to put that in a goal, but it's something that should be made.
I mean, I guess we did lead with roadway capacity and like planning, right? So we are,
Sure.
I think, trying to recognize that context that you are very auto dependent still, and that's not gonna come up. There's no switch being flipped there, right? Yeah.
That's what I like about the Metra and some of those other regional transportation solutions is because that might actually start addressing that regional flow of people.
Yeah, the one on the top there.
Well, before we get away from transit, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask him, what kind of statistics are there about Metro ridership? Because this is a long commute, from.
On the Metro Northwest, the Harvard to Chicago, that's number one. That's our number one. I used to be on the Metro board, and that's number one. And they protect that route, and I failed on the Metro board to get hourly service for McHenry. Okay, because I had the city anti me for trying to get hourly service because they didn't want McHenry to have hourly service. So
I was kind of wondering, I commuted into the city for 20 years, out in Naperville, and there was like service about every hour.
It's our gem. The Harvard,
Wow, good to
it's
know.
our gem on the Metro line.
That being said, the primary volume on that line is the whole Arlington Heights and Palatine kind of swing of people. I think we're sitting around 1,000 a day pre-COVID. I don't know what it is right now.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, it was about 1,000 a day at both Crystal Lake and Pingree. Woodstock was around 400 a day. Harvard's what?
150.
150 a day. So that's your volume.
So
right
it's pretty light actually.
Yeah, relative.
And it's a long commute.
It is.
That's what I was just wondering is like what kind of statistics.
COVID did in a lot of everything for Metra. Pace was one of the few transit people who actually didn't lose as much. We were always at 40% and then 50% and then 60% because the people that Pace handles are the people generally in suburban Cook County where they have an hour and a half route to get to Chicago to get a job at all. And so we had certain advantages to be able to go on less on shoulders with that. It's never lost anybody. But now with Metra having 12 more trains a day and every half hour, which we've never had before, to get people down to Chicago and back again, everybody's been on the road because it's been so much fun, and it's not gonna be fun for the next 3 years because of the Kennedy. So that's going to jump that a lot,
Yeah.
quickly.
So we had a comment, Michelle.
Yeah, just that, you know, the project to relocate the rail yard from Crystal Lake to Woodstock, to increase service to, you know, the further down the line, like, that's a big priority for Metro too. And, you know, they've like run their numbers there, and like, I think, like, are very sure that it's gonna be worth their while.
Yeah.
And like I was talking about bus service not being, you need density to support bus service. Same thing with Metro service, right? The reason we're not seeing more ridership is because we're not Arlington Heights, we're not Palatine, where they have high-density residential right next to the downtown train station, right? As cities like Woodstock continues to redevelop their downtown to add more infill development, Metro service is gonna increase substantially. I just hope more cities are as forward-thinking as Woodstock is with adding transit-oriented development to their downtowns.
So what we did about 3 years ago is we approved a new downtown development plan, and specifically in the goal of the plan is double the density in the quarter-mile radius of that train station over the next 10 years or so. And, you know, it was kind of a chicken and egg relationship with Metro, where they're not giving us more trains because we didn't have enough density, but we don't have enough density because we don't have more trains. So we're like, we can fix that by, we're gonna take charge of the density and try to insert as much as we can. So, and Metro is now responding,
Excellent.
so it's good.
All right, so move on to bike and ped facilities. Again, the main item that was highlighted here was the need to prioritize new sidewalk construction within proximity to public transit stops. But again, big picture, this kind of feeds into the previous comment slides about first and last mile improvements, trying to make sure everything fits together, and improving mobility outside of auto. Commentary on the bike and ped component.
I just like how, you know, when I was trying to come up with my questions, how there's interconnection between the different, like really the 15-minute, you know, city, whatever, it meshes with this, just like a lot of the natural area, like
Yeah,
stuff.
that transit supportive, kind of active
Yes.
lifestyle transportation network. Yeah. And then sustainable transportation alternatives. Again, we talked about EV, so a few things centered on EV. We mentioned the bike MC program, micromobility services, car sharing, commentary discussion on this piece. Again, Scott, I know you said kind of you wanted to make sure all these talked about, so I don't know if any of these you have
No.
priorities.
If
throw it out
anything, I
there.
think maybe this is a little too detailed,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll work with Brandon on sort of paring some of this back, be more general, because our plan is gonna get into this level of specificity.
Right.
Maybe this plan doesn't need to get this specific, so we'll work on that.
Yeah. All right, Eric, you're off the hook. Good job. And then the last set of goals that you guys flagged as priority were regarding historic preservation. Erica with McGuire Gillespie has had a long-standing conflict with tonight's meeting, so she couldn't make this, so I'm doing my best to stand in here for this one as well. Went through and documented kind of existing historic resources as best we could within the scope of this project. We have the Great Scenic Streets and Roads programs, we're documenting that. The Register of Historic Places is 13 properties. And we've mapped and done a photo inventory of kind of all the different resources across the county. The areas with the yellow kind of labels are kind of historic crossroads that have been identified. Those find their way into the land use framework as well. So with this one, I think the main item that was hit on was the partnering with the Conservation District, including a focus on your heritage groves areas. I think there's also some comments about the Little Crossroads concept as well.
Just have one piece here. I feel like this could be an opportunity to incorporate some more of the DEI concepts. I'm not sure how much the historical society is doing around this, and there is an opportunity to kind of like include everybody's story in this. You know, McHenry County has such a rich history with like so many different communities, and so I wonder if we can, as a commission, encourage the inclusion of that here too.
Michelle, did you put in initials there for EEI or something like that?
DEI, diversity,
DEI, okay,
equity,
sorry,
inclusion.
I didn't hear that correctly, because I'm going, what was that one? Thank you.
Any other comments?
I guess I'll just take the opportunity, like, point of clarification, if we saw some other places where maybe we thought DEI was appropriate, do you want us to just like
Yeah.
highlight those and send them to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and we can talk about, I guess before we wrap up this section, I can talk about some next steps with that, but, and then, sorry, there was also someone that flagged the need to update the rural structure survey. Yeah, any other comments or questions on historic preservation?
Just, I do think it's important because it's just part of the whole thing of what we want to do is, preserve our land, preserve our heritage and our history. And I think it's really important. In fact, a friend told me that, I don't know if you know about this, there's the first silo ever in the United States. Is they wanted to, I think it's near Richmond. Pat Lawler just told me this. And they're wanting to knock it down. I mean, that's like something, you don't know about that? I'll have to find out where that is, but she said that it was like an experiment, building the first silo in the whole country, and they want to knock, things like that, and it's in McHenry County, she said. So I just somehow think that this kind of can put a lot of what we want together, like because it's aesthetic too, it's our history, and it's the feel, and it's gorgeous, it's just gorgeous.
So a demolition delay ordinance, the very last one is incredibly important.
That's,
Probably as much as the 15% open space. We've got so many historical things. If we had a demolition delay ordinance, that people would be able to get the information to know when word can go out, to be able to bring that towards. I don't know if we can do that as a county or not, but it's something to kind of look at.
Well, certainly well over half of the barns that were around in my childhood
Are gone.
Yeah.
Is the purpose of that to ensure something doesn't get demolished, that's a historic, because it's under historic preservation, I'm assuming that's what that.
It doesn't
So if something
occur,
gets flagged
but it
for
helps.
redevelopment, they're gonna demo something, there's a window of time where someone can say, this has potential significance, we need to
Okay.
pump the brakes,
Got it.
and then it triggers the work.
So just
Renee.
so everybody knows, what we currently do, we can't deny anyone a demolition permit, even if it's a landmark property. But when anyone comes into our office, because it's the planners that actually sign off on the demolition permits, anything that was built prior to 1976 now, I think it is, we give them their permit, but we notice our Historic Preservation Commission, and they are really good, especially our chairman, Steve Greeley, about reaching out to people and talking to them about if they're set on demolishing a significant structure, at least we go out and take photographs and document what was there, which is also what we're doing with the rural surveys as well, is just not, it's not lost forever. And also, we have a list of places that they can donate for salvage value and that sort of thing as well, so we're doing a little bit of that. It's just not, we can't delay anything, but we're making an attempt at least.
Alrighty.
All right, so the last piece I think we'll have time for tonight is the land use framework. I do want to say, based on tonight's commentary, I think we do want to give a little bit of a window for you guys to give us additional feedback via email. We'll go through Renee, is that maybe?
Everything should go to Renee
Yeah.
with a
So-
copy to me, so I'm just aware, and we'll get it off to you.
You wanna give people till like next Friday? Like how long do you wanna give folks?
Sounds good to me. Is
Okay.
Friday good for everybody?
And what's that for? I'm sorry.
Next week,
So-
Friday, for additional comments on
Additional
what you
written
saw
comments.
tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we will have, we'll have a copy of your PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, we can share that.
So
absolutely.
Renee can get that out as quickly as possible if people want to, and they can always come back and watch 2.5 hours and 45 minutes of, I think, very good conversation today. I think this really moved us
Yeah.
forward in understanding what we're doing and getting that input so we can work with it better. So, go ahead.
So yeah,
Quickly.
additional DAI, flying the our flag, other things like that. Please get those into comments, send them to Renee, and then we'll get everything together and turn around a revised draft. All right, so Tricia's gonna walk us through the preliminary land use framework. We'll answer what questions you have tonight. Again, it's really, I think, just to kind of walk you through what the heck we put on that map. So there's already been some discussion about that. It's basically setting the stage for the next part of the process, which I'll talk about.
Hi, everyone. So just to start off, to clarify what the map is that you're looking at, it is not the land use plan. We have not made it there yet. It is really just a tool for us to have this discussion and kind of come to like an agreed upon way forward on how we're going to develop the land use plan once we get to that stage. So how we're gonna get to the land use plan is, first, we're starting with this preliminary framework. And then the next steps, we're gonna go into scenario modeling. We're gonna work with staff to kind of develop that, and then we're gonna bring it back to you guys. And we're gonna have a discussion on the different scenarios. And then with that preferred scenario, we're going to develop the land use plan. So we're still a couple steps away, but this is where we're gonna start with this framework. So here's the map, you guys all should have it. So I'm just gonna kind of talk through the different classifications that we have. So the first one is conservation and low impact design. So this area is like this kind of dotted area. It is an overlay on top of the other classifications. So this is incorporating both class 3 groundwater and your SARA. So it's especially, so the county has overlays for both of these areas currently, but we wanted to highlight them because they are very important. And so in these areas, it's especially important to facilitate low impact design and conservation design.
So it also guides kind of, I mean, you already have restrictions on development. This could be used as a way of further saying, hey, we don't want to encourage growth in some areas. This is a perfect example of that.
So then areas of conservation, so this is including a bunch of different stuff. So this is your tree canopies, wetlands, those protected lands, all incorporated together. And so this is that light green area. So these areas are areas that we want to preserve and we are not encouraging growth in.
Maybe the productive farmland.
Oh, sorry, yeah. This also includes areas of productive farmland. For this analysis, or for this mapping, we defined productive farmland or prime farmland as areas that have been farmed for corn for more than 5 years. So we don't have
Consecutive years.
consecutive years, yeah. So that's what we're calling prime farmland for this map. So we kind of talked about this earlier, the urban infill development. So those are these orange pockets here. These are areas that are fully surrounded by municipalities. So these are going to be the priority areas for development and potentially annexation. The second are these fringe developments. So these are these yellow areas. So that those are the 1.5 mile extraterritorial jurisdictions. So those are areas where the communities or the municipalities have the ability to plan into, but they are unincorporated areas. So these are priority, but they are not as high as the orange areas, as we've kind of talked about. And moving forward, we're probably going to be, we don't want to, it's in the orange, but maybe this isn't the first place we're going. We're going to be looking more, not having the leapfrog development, but that continuous impact developments and going from the municipalities outwards. So rural crossroads, so these are those red dots, so those are those rural crossroads within the county. So we, as we kind of talked about earlier, that 15-minute community or 15-minute neighborhoods, these are already areas that are a little bit denser of residential and some commercial. So these are good starting points for you know, creating those 15-minute communities. And also we talked about historic preservation. So having these as kind of those, like reinvigorate them a little bit. So having these focuses for potential, a little bit more density can also help preserve these areas. Rural infill. So these are these blue dots here. So as we also talked about, there are a number of residential areas that have been platted but are still vacant. So before we're, you know, moving out into other rural areas, we want to be focusing on these. So that also ties back to not converting any ag land into non-ag land. We already have these vacant lots ready for residential development, so focusing on those before we're moving out into agricultural areas. Existing employment centers, so we have a couple areas within the county, sorry Renee.
I've seen it.
A couple areas within the county that already have industrial development, so again, you know, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, like contiguous compact development. So focusing on areas where this is already existing before we're spreading out. And last but not least, so before we're moving on to these yellow areas, these light yellow areas, we want to be focusing on all the things I had said previously. These, like the infill, the fringe, but these areas, these yellow areas they're the light yellow areas, are areas that really don't fall within any of the others, so they could be developed for rural residential, or continue to be ag, but if we did want to, you know, see more residential development far, far, far into the future, those could be appropriate.
So,
And that's it.
go back to the first one maybe. So, just real quick to kind of put this in kind of how this is being used. Again, this is kind of that starting point for the scenario modeling process and where we get into how do we want to encourage land use and development moving forward, given all the stuff we talked about tonight. The areas in orange that aren't stippled with that green are basically areas that could be potentially contiguous to infrastructure, that are within ETJs for municipalities, that wouldn't impact your water recharge areas or other, the groundwater overlay. So those are the areas that, from a plan perspective, we want to kind of look at first in coordination with municipalities to say, hey, if we're talking about future growth into kind of unincorporated areas, let's maybe focus on this first. And then even within that area, it's a big area, let's further constrain that. Those dark orange areas, all day long, let's try to push development to kind of fill in those pockets. And then we mentioned that productive ag land and kind of light green areas happen in here. We'll work to refine that, working with Solutions in Land about how we want to really distill that down. But in general, all those areas in that light green are highly productive ag land and or within those other green infrastructure categories. The areas in light yellow, mostly ag, but they just happen to be not the top tier. So from a development pressure standpoint, if we were in a cave somewhere, those might be areas to consider. That's kind of loosely putting it for perspective, right? But based on tonight's conversation. So that's kind of the starting point. And so one of the things we want to get into next, and working kind of internally as a team with staff, is to identify those areas where we think it makes sense to maybe zero in on and talk about, all right, well, if development happens in these key areas, maybe like first things first, let's model out existing municipal plans. What does that mean for these areas in terms of growth and development capacity? How many residential units would we be talking about if we were to implement municipal plans in these areas, for example? What happens if we apply some of these practices we were just talking about tonight? What does that look like? And something in between. So we want to work with staff to identify some of those key areas of focus, and then work with staff to work through some potential scenarios and then come back to the table with you guys and say, hey, this is what we've learned about these various scenarios, and looking at development capacity in alignment with the recommendations we've talked about here tonight. So we'll be developing what's called an ArcGIS urban model, but basically a way of modeling out development capacity, applying various housing densities, applying various employment and other development kind of ratios to these areas to look at overall impact. And working with the team, we can look at things like potential trip generation, we can look at things like potential impact to the watershed, you name it. So that's kind of the next step in how this map is going to be used. There's a question.
Yes. Are flood zones considered in this, and like when did those layer in? Because I'm like looking at this one area that I'm like very sure is in a flood zone up by the Statey Highlands, and it's, you know, colored as fringe development, so.
They should be incorporated into the light green. It could just be we have a little bit outdated data, or that might be it.
I think we used 500-year floodplain and wetlands, correct?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. What area in particular are you looking at?
It's like up kind of by the Statey Highlands.
You're gonna have to help us out there.
Top right. Well, and those are regulated.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so, yeah.
We have the,
You
yeah.
have the
It looks like
dots.
maybe the line does draw through like part that would flood, I don't know, but I just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on the map.
Yeah.
It's kind of small. I'll double check it.
Okay, cool.
How does Becerra go? Is
It's
that
incorporated into the stipple, kind of like
The
green.
green
Oh, okay,
overlay.
okay.
Yeah. Are there questions or thoughts on this? And I do see a hand from the.
Way too much orange from my
I saw someone from there. Yeah.
Again, I'm just kind of making a link with green infrastructure. Did you use the green infrastructure map overlay as part of your areas of conservation? Because it
You can go
includes
to
some
the
areas
side.
beyond just those individual categories, including buffers and connecting corridors and things like that.
So this is what was included. This is the data we had. Go to
Which one?
the one, that one, this one. This is what's included. So wetlands is also flood.
So you're saying the plan map?
There's more in the green infrastructure map itself than what you have in these categories.
So it might be we don't have it.
That is a data layer, that is a data layer on our website,
Okay.
on the Plan Dev website.
We'll have to
Get that later.
Yeah, we'll have to get it, because I don't think we have
Yeah.
it. So that can further constrain those yellow and orange areas.
Yeah, it seems like it's not.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think, we're out of time.
No, that's okay.
We got time.
I think this was very productive as where it went. We got our questions in time as opposed to trying to give them now. So I hope you didn't feel pushed, and I don't think anybody felt that we were ignoring them and raising hands and answering questions. And for anybody who is coming to these next meetings, they're gonna start at 6 o'clock, and hopefully they will only be 2 hours, but here's the deal, they're all streamed. So if you can't stay, we'd like you to be here for the input that you can put in, because I think, Michelle, you did a fine job today, even though you are constrained. That we can get a whole bunch of stuff done, and you can watch them when you're at home and come up with your questions and bring those forward at the time. If that's okay? Anybody else, folks?
Good meeting.
Thank you all. Oh, wait, Renee has something.
Can we just
Got
make
5 minutes.
a couple announcements?
Sure.
The next meeting will be April 27th at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then any remaining questions or questions that were sparked by tonight's conversation, get them to me by next Friday to include.
So the Thursday?
So,
I'm sorry, Carolyn?
oh no, it's okay, just but to that end, are we gonna have an opportunity to talk again as a group with this goals and recommendations?
Sure.
I mean, we're not just submitting it and then getting a document and then we're done. We're gonna have an opportunity to go through
No,
it. Is that gonna be
absolutely.
is
We'll
that the
have
next
more.
meeting?
more things go. Well, the next meeting, we're going to be talking about, we're going to have presenters. If we have other time, Brandon will find out if we need to do something with him on a conference call. For instance, if we still need to do that, take out like maybe a half an hour or so where we can come up with other questions and group them in such a way so we can get that all done. Yeah, this is not the end of this. This is not, we could go till 10 o'clock, we could do it next week, but you know, you've got so much information right now that I think if you had to do more, your eyes would cross. And
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
I took Mary's questionnaire.
I did want you to talk about that.
And I called two McHenry County Supervisor Gary, and I called McHenry, Door Township, McHenry Township and Door Township Supervisors, and asked them the questions, and they were elated that they were involved. And they would like input from us. And if anybody else would consider calling one of the 17 townships, and just, I spent 10 minutes with them on the phone. They were updated what we're doing, and they gave me information about what they were
Right.
doing.
And I had tried to contact the supervisor of the supervisors, and she hasn't gotten back to me, but apparently she talked to you, and that's wonderful, to see if they would want to make a presentation to us.
Right.
At some point, so that they could tell us how townships work, because they are specific for what they're able to do and how much they can get done.
And some of them, like Marengo, have you talked to the Marengo Township? They have a land
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
plan.
we've looked at existing land plans, we've invited townships to all the 3 workshops we held, we had a couple attend. We have not made individual calls to every township though. We've tried to have group meetings.
I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no.
Because I know a lot of people in the county.
Well,
Yeah,
Gary,
that's great.
why don't we designate you as the contact for the townships, and then you can report from them
Okay.
each month of anything
Sounds
that
great.
you've
Great.
learned, and you
Yeah.
can figure out.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just ask if you have notes from those calls that you can
Get 'em
share.
back
with
to
the
Yeah,
board.
and I'll email them to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Email them to.
email them to Renee.
Yeah.
She'll get them to him. That's just, it just makes life a whole bunch simpler if we know who's going in what direction at what time.
And the final comment I have is that a friend of mine in Marengo, of one of those spots that are green, has been approached by the city of Marengo to use her land as water. We're gonna put the water
Water
plant
recharge.
there. They're gonna run the water up 23 to 90. So
And
I'll
they
keep you
talked to us-
updated on that with respect to her privacy.
Sure.
The city talked with Brandon and a group of people way back at the very beginning about, because that was always my question.
Right.
Brandon said, are you gonna ask it? Are you gonna ask it? What are you doing about your water? What are you doing about your water capacity? And Marengo had a very, very good delineation of what it is they wanted to do and where they wanted to go, as opposed to, oh yeah, we're fine. So that was our best shot in those conversations.
Well, of course, Marengo has $27 million to
Well, that's
work
true,
it out.
that's true, that is true. Okay, I want to thank you all. I'm sorry?
You need a motion?
Well, no, I have something else to say. I want to thank you all today for staying as close as you could. It is now 30 seconds past 9, and I'm going to say I'm asking for a motion to adjourn. Ms.
Second.
Glissman? Charlie? All in favor?
Aye.
Leave the room? No.
Good meeting, good meeting. Learn a lot.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
All those in favor, any opposed?
I was so glad. I am really sorry. And you're a good addition. Good addition.
Thanks, Charlie.
Very good.
We're moving forward.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe I should get one of those little bottles.
That's it, you're a blessing.
So, the county maps that they've got available.
Can we bring this back? Yes, please. See you next month. I'll let you take these. I think so.
Oh, okay. It was just, there's been Strong's Lakewood, really good. Like, he just over an actual process. We got him. I think we're.
Yeah, it's really
Fantastic presentation.
I can always.
I watched it, I was like, okay, maybe that's what I need.
Yeah, you're right.
This one? I was making sure you got it.
Yeah, I think we can.
Well, I'm gonna.
And then there's some things I really like ignored, and some things like the original, like music.
Was.
This is why I have so many people there.
I think very
A lot
much
of times that's what happens.
Right?
It's cool.
We end up with everybody's.
All right, thank you, that was what I was talking about. Yeah, good one.
You do.
Right? So I wonder if you want to do any research on that, but my back of the napkin version here is that it takes about 10 acres to get a megawatt.
All right.
Scale house solar.
This was a good one tonight.
That.
Yep.
And
One thing
200
The board was worth it.
So if there's 120,000 housing units in Henry County, that's 600
I wanna add it to
megawatts
it.
needed.
Yay, it's right.
That's 6,000
You want another
acres.
Pepsi for the road?
About 40 acres a square.